jumping with a headlock. Right, so here your normal reaction is to go on his forearm. That's perfectly fine, but you have to remember that the other hand is going to go towards his thumb area. Boom. And now you go explosive down and put the chin down. There you go. So one more time, Leo, I want you to put a little bit of pressure and see if Adi is able to actually go one with explosive motion and then put the chin. There you go. So you don't really need to release the choke, release the hold all the way. All you got to do is kind of a little bit of opening and then put the chin one more time. Explosive, boom, chin down. Yes. Now whenever you got the chin down, put it again, boom. This hand can go fingers to the eyes. Okay, you find an object, for example, the phone that is here, and you're going, so hold the phone all the way, and then you can go 90 degrees towards his eyes, towards his weak spots. Boom, boom. Excellent. All the way till he might give up, or I might get another angle or another opportunity maybe to run away. Yeah. But at least I'm able to survive, fight back,
and breathe.
And breathe, most important.
Yeah.
Adi?
Thank you.
Good job, Leo. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys for joining our Krav Maga class. You guys can stay tuned and check out our Facebook and YouTube page and learn more Krav Maga tips and lessons. Thank you. Welcome back to the show, analyzing real-life attacks caught on tape. We're going to take a look at our video, analyze it step by step, and see how can we react in this kind of scenario. Okay guys, so as you can see we have an ATM room, probably a robber here got out of something. He's hitting him with a hammer to the face, to the shoulder. The guy is on the ground, probably got robbed a couple of seconds before. The guy's on the ground again. Let's watch it one more time. As you can see, the robber's trying to run away. Then the guy that got robbed probably trying to get whatever he got robbed from. He's getting hit strongly with a hammer, severe attacks. He's on the ground, try to fight back. Then as you can see, he's actually holding the hammer itself. He was able to get the hammer. The attacker is running away, but as you can see, blood on the floor here. Let's see what can we do in this kind of situation. We have someone that is running after a robber with a hammer. First concept, if you can give up on whatever you got robbed, go home safe. Of course, that's the best thing. If you are deciding to run after your attacker and he has a hammer or any weapon in his hands, take control of the hand, take control of the danger. And don't simply hold him by the shirt like we were seeing on the video. So we have our concept, we'll demonstrate it quick. From here, he is attacking it. Take control of the weapon and on the situation. If you're running after an attacker and he has a weapon, take care the hand with the danger first. So, we were talking about it already with a knife. The only difference between an attack with a hammer to your face to an attack with a knife, that with a knife, an attack that comes from above usually looks like this. And when you're defending, you're hitting his bone, okay? You're going with your forearm, boom, and you're stomping him towards the wrist, the bone area. Now, if he's with a hammer, you can see that he hits you not exactly this way. There is an angle because he wants to hit your jaw, your face. So when you're connecting your defend on his hand, it's not anymore the bone, it's the forearm area. And when there is strong impact in the forearm area, Leo, hold it tight. As you can see, the hand can get open and the hammer can be released on your face, boom, if you're not putting the head inside. So what I'm seeing out there a lot is a mistake of people doing the same defense with a knife, with a hammer, with an axe, They're simply holding the weapon from here, thinking that this grip will help them. And this guy is wrong. What you want to do, if you're capable, is dive in, wrap this hand. And now when he wants the hammer or the weapon back, he's gonna pull it, right? Oh, but when he's pulling it, you're connected to this hand with the weapon. And when you're connected to the danger, he's pulling you, boom, you go towards him, you give him a knee. Leo, let's do it from this angle. There you go, one more time. So I'm diving in, boom. There is a defend here. Don't forget the defend, but right after there is a wrap. And from here, yeah, I can attack. I can go elbow, I can go knee, and it doesn't matter if he's pulling you because you're connected. Whoop, oh. He is actually, while he's pulling you, you can add a knee. And it doesn't matter even if you're in the air. Boom, boom. You're adding a knee, you're connected to the weapon, you're taking control of the situation and neutralizing the attacker this way. To conclude, guys, well, we had any sort of a weapon. In this case, we had a hammer. I don't want you guys to simply go this way and hold. Of course, if you're surprised, you're never going to be able to dive in. You're simply going to go one here. But the second you're understanding, whoa, you're fighting on your life, the best thing is to dive in, take control of the situation, boom, and then the weapon, boom. Take control of the weapon, go home safe. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Leo. You don't have the hammer anymore? Now it's mine.
Thank you guys for joining our Krav Maga class. You guys can stay tuned and check out our Facebook and YouTube page and learn more Krav Maga tips and lessons. Thank you.
Welcome back to the show analyzing real life attacks caught on tape. We're going to take a look at our video, analyze it step by step, and see how can we react in this kind of scenario. So as you guys can see here, we are outside of a bar. There's a bouncer, another probably drunk guy. We don't really know the story, what's happening here. But what we can see here, that is trying to punch the bouncer with a head motion back, punch to the jaw, quick knockouts. Let's take a look on a slow motion we got here. So he's trying to punch the bouncer is understanding his motion, taking his head motion back and punching back to the jaw, to the chin. As you can see, direct knockout. Now, as I said, we don't really understand the story, but we're gonna try to understand what kind of a move we can learn out of it. So there is the drunk guy who is looking for the opportunity, of course, to punch the bouncer. The bouncer sees his big move, whoops, move back, boom, goes with his own punch, and we have a clear knockout. The guy's trying, up, boom. Now, let's understand what the bouncer did. First of all, as you're able to see, the drunk guy is probably not a professional fighter because you're able to see his punch that comes from far away. Whoop, there you go. So most punches in the street, in a street fight, bar fight, are these kind of a swinging motion. Boom, that comes from the outside in. We were talking previous episode that you're usually able to see the attack and simply defend with your hand. Here we have another sort of defending that we called a simply body move, body defend, moving back and going with your own attack. Another option, like we saw the bouncer doing, is using his body motion in order to move back. Now, the bouncer didn't really move back with his legs. He was simply leaning backward, putting his shoulder up to protect his chin if he is getting the punch, and punched by himself to the jaw and was able to knock out the guy right away. Another option is actually to perform a small step backward up while you're seeing the punch. This way you can drive more energy back. One more time, Leo. One. This way you can drive more energy back from the back leg. Okay, so let's review those two moves that are actually the same and a little bit different. One, simply lay back, shoulders coming up in order to protect your chin. Your chin is the most sensitive part. The chin is connecting. If you simply tap on your chin, you're gonna feel it right away in the brain. And usually you can see it even in boxing that a strike direct to the chin, to the jaw area is providing the knockout. So when you're having a step back, you want to somehow protect your face. So one option is simply bring your hands back, right? Bring your hands back. The bouncer chose to simply lift the shoulder like we see a lot in boxing and doing, and then drive his own punch. One option, as we said, without moving back with your legs, of course that's quicker. But a very natural reaction is taking the step back, you can create more distance and drive more energy forward with your own punch. So simply your ability to see the punch, move back. As we said, most of punches in the street are not professional. Boxing punches are those big swinging motion that comes to the head. Our natural instinct is to try to gather momentum and strength, load the strike, boom. And we can see on the street that most situations are not direct knockouts. We see the guy swinging the hand, the other guy's probably trying to do something, defending with his hands. You don't have to be a genius when I'm doing this to simply defend with your hands. This is a simple, natural reaction. Then the guys are kind of bear hugging each other, they're on the ground, their friends are coming. So that's what we usually see. In this case, we have actually someone trained who was reacting to this punch, moving back, boom, punching by himself. You can add, of course, after that, a couple of more strikes. But the whole we had here is learning the body motion and reacting with your hands, with your shoulder if needed, and driving your counterattack right after it. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks, Leo.
Thank you guys for joining our Krav Maga class. You guys can stay tuned and check out our Facebook and YouTube page and learn more Krav Maga tips and lessons. Thank you.
ILTV News, your source for Israel in English. Reporting from the ground where it happens, as it happens. An authentic, trusted voice in daily Israel news. Airing on 11 international TV channels and now launching a 24/7 Israeli news channel. Reaching millions every month across all social platforms. Independent, real, powered by truth. We don't just report, we connect. Thanks to a worldwide community that stands for truth. This is ILTV, your source for Israel in English.
Welcome back to a special edition of ILTV on the Hour. I'm India Naftali, coming to you live from Israel with all the biggest headlines from across the region. We are on day 17 of Operation Roaring Lion, and these are the latest developments. This morning, multiple impact sites were reported in central Israel after Iran likely used a cluster missile in their latest attack. One injury has so far been reported. Over the past 24 hours, Israel faced multiple rocket, missile, and drone attacks from Iran and Iran-backed groups. Israeli officials say the rate of missile fire from Iran has declined since the start of the war, but attacks are expected to continue. With us now on the ground is ILTV's executive editor, Mayan Hoffman. Mayan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mayan, what is the latest situation on the ground?
So I'm here in Jerusalem, and we actually just a couple of hours ago had a first siren, something we hadn't actually experienced in about a day here in Jerusalem. There were several loud booms, interceptions above us in the sky. You know, unfortunately, I always try to get to a safe room, and that is first and foremost advised, but for some reason today didn't manage. And I'll tell you that even from where I sit in southern Jerusalem, the impact of that interception blew my porch door open. So it was a pretty loud interception and pretty large interception. And that happened at the same time as several other missiles were following in or shot into central Israel. And of course, in the north, rockets that are coming from Hezbollah. We had a series of volleys this morning in both the center and the north As you mentioned, there were several direct hits in the center, including one in Rishon LeZion and another one in Lod, which is near Ben Gurion Airport. One woman was injured in the Rishon LeZion attack, a 30-year-old woman who was in a shelter with her dog and found by Magen David Adom. Magen David Adom described the situation as tons of smoke, shrapnel, and destruction all around. And if she had not been in a shelter, certainly the injuries, which were only minor, would have been much, much more. So there was also a direct hit in Sfat in northern Israel. And again, that was from a Hezbollah rocket.
Man, that's certainly a startling experience. And speaking of the injured, what do we know about the injured so far?
So we know from the health ministry that so far 3,369 individuals have gone to the hospital since the start of the war from injuries. Most of those injuries, I do want to point out, are people running to shelters, often the elderly, who are unable to make it there or who fall on their way. Of those people who are injured, 81 are still in the hospital, and that includes 1 in critical condition and 7 in serious condition. So there are still some serious injuries. Now, what's also happening, if you remember, when the war started, all of the hospitals were forced to move underground for patients safe, because obviously patients who are in the hospital can generally not get to a shelter. And so the majority of the hospitals in the country are set up. However, because these are smaller, less open hospital environments, there's also a risk of the spread of disease. And what we're seeing now is something unexpected, but there is a very large measles infection spreading throughout some of these underground hospitals because of those crowded spaces. There have been reports at Mayanei Shua Hospital, which is in Bnei Brak, reports at Schneider Medical Center. And actually, there was a case of measles diagnosed of a child who was staying in one of the underground shelters in Tel Aviv, one of the parking lot shelters, and she contacted the disease there. So far, there have been more than 3,000 cases since the outbreak began. And the health ministry is warning that this could reach up to 16,000 measles cases. A lot of it, again, with concerns because of these underground shelters. So 24 people are still hospitalized right now with the measles. 5 of them are in intensive care. And I want to remind you that 16 people have died of the disease since the outbreak happened. So the call is to really get vaccinated, even while running to shelters, even while the war is going on. We need a 95% vaccination rate in order to ensure that people don't get sick.
Mayan, thank you for this critical update, and stay safe out there.
Thanks.
Now, we do know that around 50% of the missiles being used against Israel are cluster bombs. These warheads are extremely difficult to intercept as they release dozens of submunitions over an area of around 10 kilometers. However, not all of those bomblets explode upon impact, and that leaves a dangerous cleanup situation after a direct hit. With us now on the ground to explain these dangers is Lieutenant Dean Elsdon, the international spokesperson of the Israel Police. Dean, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
So, Dean, what kind of dangers do these unexploded cluster munitions pose to the public?
Well, you mentioned it best. This is an extreme danger to the public. This type of cluster missile has one point and one point only: to harm as many civilians as possible, and that's why the Iranian regime is using it. These missiles explode at high altitude and then spread over kilometers. One cluster missile warhead can have anywhere between 20 to 80 submunitions that essentially spread over different residential communities. And the danger here is that even after it lands, it might not fully explode, but it is very deadly. It's an armed missile that the slightest movement can cause an explosion, sending shrapnel tens of meters, and essentially could possibly kill anybody that's nearby.
And can you paint a picture of how big these submunitions are and how much damage they can really do? I know, in our heads, they might seem bigger than they really are, but I'm aware that they might appear small, but they can do some major damage.
Absolutely. So each submunition, it can vary, of course, but the standard one that our bomb disposal experts have been seeing are essentially 20 kilograms in weight with about 3 kilograms of explosives inside of them. Now, the danger part here is that once it explodes, the armored body, the metal body of the submunition is what becomes like bullets spreading around, and sharp metal that can slice and hurt anybody that's nearby, which is why we're constantly telling the public don't approach these impact scenes. I know that there's a lot of curiosity. A lot of people want to take pictures. These are not attraction sites. We need everybody to listen to the home front commands. Up until now, we've had a lot of cooperation with the public, and that is what's been saving lives. Unfortunately, we have had a few casualties, but in the vast majority of cases, we're talking about light injuries throughout the country.
And what does a cleanup of a direct hit looks like? For example, collecting those unexploded munitions or partially exploded munitions, and what are those rules for the public?
Listen, the missile itself, even if it's not the submunition, are dangerous. They're dropping from extremely high altitudes, meaning that by the time it's hitting the ground, it has a lot of kinetic energy. It can collapse a vehicle. It can kill somebody. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And like I told you before, they spread over kilometers. So when we get the initial dispatch calls of suspected landings of these projectiles, our bomb disposal units, together with the patrol officers who are already patrolling the streets, try to arrive to these locations as fast as possible together with the home front command. And we also utilize different techniques like our aviations division, who have helicopters in the air after reports of debris landing so that they can scan at a much higher altitude and see where these debris are located. Sometimes they're landing in the middle of the street, in the middle of a highway, which emphasizes the point of why it's important to pull over to the side and crouch on the floor. Sometimes we see them landing in people's houses, their backyard, or in open areas. But the point here is that it's spread over kilometers of area. The forces arrive, they have to neutralize then the explosive ordnance because it may not have exploded. It may have fuel or dangerous acid still on it that can essentially kill, that can cause vast harm to anybody who's nearby. And then we clear the area for other first responders to go in, say it's a building that was impacted. The firefighters, the home front command can go inside and conduct their life-saving activity as we've seen.
Dean, you working on the ground of these impact sites, have you seen any incidents of anyone curious or someone unknowingly tampering or taking one of these submunitions?
We've seen a number of cases where people are picking up the shrapnel device metals or ordinances that were unexploded. And I cannot emphasize enough how dangerous this is and how this can kill not just them, but if they're bringing it home, it can kill their family members. At the end of the day, this is exactly what the Iranian regime wants. We're asking for the cooperation of the public to listen to the home front command. At the end of the day, it's about your safety. We saw a case not too long ago where an individual picked up an unexploded ordnance and took it home. And later on, we were able to identify, we got this notification from a different individual, a concerned citizen. We were able to locate the guy who took this explosive ordnance, and he didn't even realize that it was armed. And our bomb disposal experts had to do a controlled explosion in order to neutralize it. But it could have ended in a disaster had it exploded.
Absolutely. And like you said, these rules are meant to save lives. And thank you for joining us from the field, and stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the Israeli Air Force hit over 200 targets in western and central Iran in the past day. According to the IDF, the targets included command centers that were manned by Iranian soldiers, air defense systems, plus weapons storage and production sites. The focus of the strikes were command centers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Basij paramilitary force. The IDF says it's expanding strikes across western and central Iran to systematically damage the regime's command and control capabilities. Footage released by the IDF shows UAV launch squads and missile teams fleeing struck sites, with an Israeli aircraft tracking and eliminating the operatives in real time. The military says these operations are designed to reduce missile and drone fire toward Israel, and they continue non-stop to destroy the regime's ballistic missile and UAV infrastructure. Now, regarding Israel's military goals for this war, the IDF just put out this statement saying they do not have the goal of toppling the regime. Take a listen.
צבא, אין לנו מטרה להפיל משטר, אנחנו לא מפילים משטר, אנחנו כן יוצרים את התנאים ומערערים אותו כדי שלאורך זמן העם האיראני ייקח את גורלו בידו ויקח אליו חזרה את המדינה הזאת שנלקחה כבת ערובה בידי משטר הטרור הזה.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump said Sunday that he has demanded about 7 countries send warships to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, though his appeals have brought no commitments as oil prices soar during the Iran war. However, Israel has been working with the United States to secure the waterway where about 1/5 of the world's traded oil normally flows. The president did not name the countries that depend heavily on Middle Eastern oil and are asked to be joining this coalition to police the strait. Here's what President Trump had to say aboard Air Force One.
We are talking to other countries about working with us for the policing of the strait. And I think we're getting good response. If we do, that's great. And if we don't, that's great too. China, as an example, gets about 90% of its oil from the Hormuz Strait. And nice to have other countries police that with us. And we'll help. We'll work militarily. As far as I'm concerned, we've essentially defeated Iran. We are demanding that these countries come in and protect their own territory because it is their territory. It's a place from which they get their energy. And they should come and they should help us protect it. You could make the case that maybe we shouldn't even be there at all because we don't need it. We have a lot of oil. We're the #1 producer anywhere in the world times 2. By double, at least double. Now I think it's much higher than that. But we do it. It's almost like we do it for habit. But we also do it for some very good allies that we have in the Middle East.
Next, the Israel Defense Forces say troops have moved deeper into southern Lebanon as part of an expanded buffer zone against Hezbollah. The IDF says the 91st Galilee Division launched a raid in the eastern sector of southern Lebanon, where troops encountered and killed several Hezbollah operatives. The military says the operation is aimed at expanding at what it calls a forward defense area, including the destruction of terror infrastructure and the elimination of armed cells operating near the border. Before ground forces advanced, the IDF says it carried out heavy airstrikes and artillery fire to remove the threats in the area. Plus, Israeli officials have told Reuters and Jerusalem Jerusalem and Beirut are expected to hold talks in the coming days aimed at securing a durable ceasefire and the disarmament of Hezbollah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's confidant Ron Dermer would take the leading of the talks for Israel, with the participation of U.S. and French mediators. Beirut is forming a delegation, but no date has been set. However, on Sunday, Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar denied such talks will happen. He also blamed the Lebanese government for not doing enough. Take a listen.
If the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army want to change something, they should do something in order to stop the attacks being done by Hezbollah from Lebanese territory. Until now, they hadn't done anything significant in order to stop it.
Next, Israel is changing the way missile warnings are issued as the war with Iran enters its 3rd week. The IDF's Homefront Command says the country will now be divided into 21 separate alert zones, replacing the previous system of just 4 regions. Officials say the change is designed to improve accuracy and reduce false alerts by sending warnings only to areas actually at risk from incoming missiles or interceptor debris. The upgraded system uses operational data and new technology to better predict potential impact zones. Civil defense guidelines for the public remain the same. Residents are still urged to enter a protected space when sirens sound and stay there until all clear is given. With us now to discuss today's headlines is Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich, Director of AJC Jerusalem and former IDF spokesperson. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, we're on day 17 of this war. So from a strategic perspective, how do you assess where this war stands right now?
So I would say in terms of Iran, first of all, it's a multi-arena. We're talking about Lebanon and Iran. But on the Iranian front, I would say that there are many, many significant achievements in all levels, whether it's Revolutionary Guards terror sites, whether it's nuclear components of the industry, whether it's defense industries, whether it's air bases, navy assets, you name it. Basically, on each and every sector, there are serious hits on the regime's assets. And this is quite significant. However, if the question implies to whether do we see cracks in the Revolutionary Guards, then we are not quite there yet. I mean, we do see them trying to hide away. For example, they have moved from their own bases to hiding in schools and in mosques to make sure that they are not identified by civilians or by drones, surveillance drones of different kinds. But we do see some cracks in the chain of command. In other words, when they're firing a missile to Turkey, then I'm not sure this is what the Revolutionary Guards are really aiming to achieve, and they've done that 3 times. So we do see there inconsistencies, but we are not seeing a situation in which tomorrow morning or in another few days, this Revolutionary Guard, together with the regime, will collapse.
And that actually leads me to ask, did Israel or the U.S. have a timeline in which they expected to see cracks? Is this taking longer than they initially expected?
I don't believe it is. Now, Israel and the U.S. did have teams which worked shoulder to shoulder for many weeks. What the teams actually did was comply a whole list of targets. And as you understand, this is a huge country. You know, the Iranian regime has waited for this moment for 47 years. So for 47 long years, they accumulated different kinds of military assets. And therefore, the list of targets, I believe, is in many thousands. And therefore, 17 days is far from being enough from handling this challenge. I will say, though, that here in Israel, we do see a decrease in the amount of ballistic missiles which Iran is firing. If you make a comparison from day 1, 2, 3 to today, day 17, you can really see that instead of firing a barrage of 20, 30 rockets, they're firing something like 1 or 2 or maximum 3. So that means that their original plans are not really being executed.
And the IDF says it has struck more than 200 targets inside Iran in just the past day. And over the course of this operation, it's been thousands of targets struck, around 5,000 according to CENTCOM. Do we know how much longer the IRGC can withhold these U.S.-Israel strikes?
So first of all, the numbers are quite amazing and very impressive. I mean, I divided the total IDF attacks, which is more than 7,600, to just, the last days, and you have more than 500 attacks per day. It's crazy given the fact that Iran is 2,000 kilometers away from Israel. But as I said before, the Revolutionary Guards are prepared. So we need still to be resilient here in Israel. We need to have a lot of patience. We need to understand that this kind of disruption in our lives, which is ongoing for the last 2.5 years, actually, will continue. And it may continue all the way to Pesach, and it may continue even after Pesach, because this is a huge country with a lot of military assets. Although the best air forces in the world are working together, this will still take time.
And as an Israeli, I'd like you to speak on behalf of, what the majority of Israelis are feeling. Do most Israelis feel that this war in the end is worth it, worth the suffering that we're going through in order to eliminate this regime? How are Israelis feeling about this operation?
So recent polls here in Israel testing the sentiment among the Israelis actually show that there is a huge percentage of support. So over 90% of the Israelis support the current operation in Iran. But I think there is a current theme there. And the Israelis are saying, we are willing to go to shelters. We are willing to take our kids in the middle of the night and run when we hear the sirens, which are quite scary. We're willing to put our lives on the side for a few months, but please make sure that this ends. In other words, the Israelis are looking for a definitive solution. They don't want to be in a repeat kind of situation every year, again and again and again. And, it's very difficult to predict and see what will happen. But right now, the Israelis are giving their support to the government here.
And what do we know right now about Iran's so-called supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei?
Yeah, this is really practically a joke, I would say, because when you appoint a leader, you're trying to project some sort of stability in the country, in the regime, that the leadership is continuing, that the country is under control. There's someone with strong hands on the wheel, which is navigating the country. And what do we get? We get an anchor, a woman anchor on one of the Iranian TV channels, which is reading a few lines supposedly written by Mojtaba. We don't see his face. We have some sort of an X account, which some, I don't know, sermons are being posted there. And we have people who are speaking on behalf of Mojtaba. And then we have different kinds of rumors about his private life, about his assets. One thing is clear, by the way. This guy is a billionaire. Of course, Khamenei was a billionaire, and his son is also a billionaire, and he holds assets all over the world, in Europe, in the Gulf countries, in other places as well. But when a person is not there, when a leader is not evident, when he's not there publicly, when he does not engage with his own people, then this is really very not serious. And this is a huge mistake on part of the Revolutionary Guards. They really appointed someone who is not existent.
And the IDF announced that Israel's war goal is not to topple the regime. What are the Israeli war goals, and do they differ from the American war goals?
It's a great question, and the answer is no, they don't differ. And we heard the goals when General Kane gave a whole press briefing and detailed the goals. There are 4 goals to the Israeli and the Americans. The first one is actually to get rid of all the nuclear capabilities of Iran. And this is very challenging. Keep in mind that they have facilities and factories all over the country. Some of them are underground, some of them are above ground, and so on. That's the number 1 goal. The second goal is to get rid of those 438 kilograms of enriched uranium. That could be sufficient for 10 to 11 bombs, and this is an immediate danger as well. The third goal is to harm the ballistic missile production and the launchers, which I believe, according to the numbers I've seen from the IDF, at least 60% of those launchers have been destroyed, and the 80% of the capacity of manufacturing additional ballistic missiles. As a matter of fact, the Iranians weren't able to manufacture even 1 ballistic missiles in the past 17 days. And the final goal, the fourth goal, is to decapitate the proxies of Iran. As you know, we have Hezbollah, we spoke about that. But there are also the Houthis in Yemen, still waiting, sitting on the fence, not involved yet. And of course, we have different pro-Iranian militias in Iraq, which are also posing a threat. And they also attack American assets in Iraq. So these are the 4 goals. And of course, the military will not talk about political goals. This is something which is left for the political echelon in both countries.
And now I do want to move to proxies. You just mentioned the Houthis and Hezbollah. Why haven't the Houthis, despite saying that they were going to join the war, why have they been silent relatively during these past 17 days?
Yeah, this is a surprise, actually, because the Houthis are 100% an Iranian proxy. They were armed and trained and funded by the Iranians. As a matter of fact, we've seen them attack Israel over and over again in the past 2 years, since October 7th. One reason could be that they're waiting for the Iranian order, for the Iranian directive to act. And that may come only at a time where Iran feels really with their back against the wall, in a situation that they need to exert additional pressure on the Western world. And therefore, they're waiting for that moment. But my analysis is that we should probably see the Houthis intervene in a very active way. But this is not something that Israel isn't able to cope with. We have done that in the past many, many times. And with the air defense layers that we have here, I'm sure we'll be able to handle this threat as well.
We're hearing mixed signals about possible talks between Israel and Lebanon over a ceasefire and Hezbollah's disarmament. How realistic is that scenario right now?
So I don't want to underestimate the music we're hearing from Lebanon, because for the past 16 months, since Israel went into a ceasefire, November 2024 with Lebanon, we've been hearing unprecedented kind of public statements by the president of Lebanon, the prime minister, the foreign minister, even the justice minister. And the president, even a few days ago, posted his plan in a Lebanese newspaper, and one of the bullets on this plan included direct talks with Israel for normalization. So while this is very much appreciated, the practicality part is actually missing. Even the intention of the justice minister to arrest Hezbollah terrorists were actually really not happening, because they did arrest 20 people last week, but when they were brought to court on Friday, they were released on bail, $20 each, because of Hezbollah pressure. So I'm not sure that the practicality part is in place. The sound bites, the messaging, the public intentions are all very welcomed. The question is the government strong enough to get rid of Hezbollah and leave it only as a political party? And I'm not sure that we will see that, but something interesting will happen here. Israel, on the one hand, will continue to defend Israel on the ground in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, and at the same time will negotiate. And this is something worth following, because this is a first, at least in this part of the area.
And really, according to the last ceasefire agreement that you mentioned between Israel and Lebanon, Lebanon was supposed to be responsible. The Lebanese government and army was responsible to deal with Hezbollah. And so far, it really hasn't happened, at least in the large part. Why hasn't Lebanon been able to deal with them?
Yeah, so the Lebanese army is suffering of a neglect for many decades in manpower, in technology, in training, in overall capabilities. This is not a military that is able to confront the capabilities of Hezbollah, which have been around almost 50 years, funded, trained with the best gear from Iran. By the way, when we were in Lebanon just last year, I can share with you the amount of weapons and military assets that were taken out from the villages in South Lebanon, exactly where the IDF is today. Many of them were brand new. We saw anti-tank missiles wrapped as new. And the gear that they were using, the commando units of Hezbollah, was brand new. And this is not what the Lebanese army has. So that's the main reason of not being able to confront. And there's also another reason. According to the law in Lebanon, and this is not something new, 50% of the military in Lebanon needs to comprise of Shiites. Hezbollah is a Shiite organization. And how would that work? Will a Shiite Lebanese army soldier will arrest another Shiite Hezbollah person if they're from the same village, from the same clan? That's never going to happen because of cultural issues. So for these two main reasons, we can't really see the Lebanese army delivering the same commitments it had to since November 2024.
So you're not saying it's for lack of desire to deal with Hezbollah, but lack of capabilities?
Capabilities, but also desire, because the Shiite part has to do with desire. One Shiite Lebanese, I'll give you an analogy. Imagine a village, there are 200 villages in South Lebanon, okay? 1.3 million Lebanese live there. Most of them are Shiites. And imagine that in one house, in one of those villages, there's a family, and that family has two sons. One son is a member of Hezbollah, and the other son is a member of the Lebanese armed forces. And that's exactly the story. And they will not arrest each other. They will not disclose each other. Its loyalty to the Shia is above any legal framework.
And finally, Israel is now changing its missile warning to 21 alert zones. What does that tell us about how the war is evolving and how the home front command is adapting actually quite quickly?
First of all, it tells us that we have a huge advantage here in Israel. We are seeing 12 additional countries which are being attacked by Iran. None of them have this amazing opportunity to get ready to go to the shelter in 10 minutes. This is really unique because of the alert system that Israel has developed in the course of the years. Of course, radars that we have here in the country and in the region, basically in order to minimize the need for millions and millions of Israelis to go into shelter time and time again when the sirens or the alerts are being activated. When you minimize the alert zone, this means that you are more accurate in who you are alerting and who you are sending to the shelter. So this will allow additional life for most of the people, most of the time, rather than paralyzing so many millions.
Lieutenant Colonel Leibovich, it's been such a pleasure and honor to have you on our show. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And now the escalation between Iran, Israel, and the United States has triggered a wave of viral war footage across social media. But many of the videos gaining millions of views are misleading as the crisis in the Middle East intensifies. Platforms have been flooded with clips claiming to show missile strikes and military action in Israel and Iran. However, fact checkers say many of these videos do not show the war at all. Some are old footage taken out of context from other conflicts or countries. Others are clips from video games, while most of the viral videos appear to be entirely generated using artificial intelligence. Officials and analysts warn that the spread of this false war footage is making it harder for the public to distinguish between real events on the ground and online disinformation. Joining us now to discuss this is Professor Gabriel Wyman, a communication researcher at Reichman University, and Tal Or Cohen Montemayor, the CEO and founder of Cyberwell. Thank you both for being here.
Hi.
I'd like to ask, how serious is this issue of AI-generated images in this war?
Who's the one to answer?
I'll let you start, Professor.
Okay, the psychological arena is not new, and using social media as an exchange between Israel and Iran is not new. Fake news, were used before on social media by Iran and by Iran's proxies. And even the use of AI to produce fake or deep fake videos, pictures, news is not that new. The issue now is, why do they use social media? And there are two reasons for that. First, all the advantages, the package of advantages that comes with social media. No censorship. It's a multimedia platform. You can put text, videos, pictures, and so on. There are no gatekeepers, no censors, nobody who will check the facts and stop the use of fake news. And it's fast, it's global, it's reaching huge audiences all over the world and in the Middle East. So that's the normal package that comes with social media. But there's one more advantage that we have to consider. The internet is down in Iran. Iran can launch its campaign targeting Israel, the Arab nations, the proxies, and the Western public opinion. It is almost impossible to fight back, since most of the Iranians cannot access social media and cannot access digital media at all.
And Ms. Tal Or, we understand that these videos are going viral and we're seeing them, we're getting millions of views, but why does it matter? I mean, let's say some people are getting duped. Why does this matter?
Sure. Well, I think something that has absolutely changed, we can say that this is not new, but the fact of the matter remains that generative AI is absolutely a new tool, both in the hands of extremist terror groups and state actors like Iran, like Russia, who are actually using generative AI and fake information that is extremely convincing at this point, not even discernible to journalists a lot of the times, who find themselves setting up and sending out this misinformation and disinformation. And the reason that this is a big deal is because, very simply, you can see it even, especially in the United States. The United States is involved in this war against the IRGC in a way that it previously wasn't. And the public opinion on the United States involvement has an effect. The public opinion in the Gulf countries about how their states are responding to this and their work with the United States has an effect. So we see a leveraging of generative AI technology that it may not be new, but it's absolutely new in how convincing it is. X actually made a move recently announcing that it was going to demonetize influencers or monetized accounts that were sending out fake generative AI information that was connected to this war. Now, for me, as the CEO of Cyberwell, this is fascinating because, of course, Cyberwell, being the first ever open database of online anti-Semitism that actually sends in real-time alerts about unfolding anti-Semitic trends and misinformation to social media platforms, we actually saw generative AI being leveraged as a tool during October 7th and certainly in June 2025. So it has been very interesting for me to see that in this US-led operation against the IRGC, now we're seeing American platforms take a stance on this issue of how generative AI is abused on social media to spread misinformation and disinformation. Leading off of that, Meta's Oversight Board, which is their Supreme Court of Content Moderation, actually issued a statement encouraging Meta to take a more robust policy stance on the abuses of generative AI. But to your question as to why this is such a big deal, very simply, in the fog of war, in a region that definitely most Americans don't know enough about, generative AI content that can be false and misleading is something that's going to reach the average American user much more quickly than facts and high-level analysis on the Middle East.
And Professor, how is it possible to avoid getting duped? We've all seen videos ourselves where we had to look twice and really question, was that a real video? How can we avoid falling for these?
Let me question the statement made by Talo about the impact and the power of AI. AI was used by Hamas and Hezbollah. We studied the impact of Hamas using it in the last war. We saw Iran using it last year in the 12 Days War. And we did a study on the impact and the credibility of those videos. And I would like to question the impact and the credibility. First, because there are ways to identify fake news and there are ways to check the validity of the facts presented. And it's sometimes even getting too absurd when Iran is claiming that they killed Netanyahu, and Netanyahu shows up a minute later drinking a coffee and speaking live on TV. There is a way to fight back. And second, it's not only a one-sided game. The Israelis also flood the media with our own videos, with our own news, and methods of media in the West to check facts, to check the validity of AI-produced videos are certainly limiting them. So I don't think we are now facing a wave of successful campaign launched by the sophisticated AI producers in Iran. They do try to harness new technologies from social media to AI and fake news and deep news and deepfake, but I really doubt the efficiency and the impact, considering the fact that the credibility of these AI-produced videos and facts are easily checked and easily proved to be wrong.
I think it depends on what you consider the impact of credibility. If you think the impact of credibility is limited to traditional media and to decision makers, then maybe you think the impact of credibility is in fact limited. But when we look at the fact of just the political discourse around this war in the United States, and it's not only limited to the misinformation and generative AI fakes that are being put out into social media, but the way that this war is being politicized on the ground in the United States and in Europe and in the Gulf countries, these stints of very believable and I would say increasing believable pieces of misinformation. I'm not talking about Netanyahu being killed. I'm talking about, for example, a highly believable image or video of a US naval base outside of Iraq being targeted and blowing up. Now, these moments, right, because there's the psyche of the public in the war, it's the battle on the psyche of the public. And I do think that that has a lot of weight, even if it's not through the traditional media sources or decision makers that we would consider credible. I think if you look at the use of CENTCOM's X account in this war, it's actually very indicative of just how seriously even the military takes these types of campaigns. CENTCOM has been on its own fact-checking, fact-finding, debunking X thread ever since the outpouring of misinformation and generative AI has been part of this war. I think also the announcement by X to demonetize accounts that are sharing misinformation and disinformation that are connected to the war is very much an acknowledgement of the US powers of just how significant this is. And you and I absolutely do agree, as I also studied the use of generative AI on October 7th, the use of generative AI in June. I'm just noticing that right now, the abuse of generative AI, and I would say even more than that, hate content in this war is being much more taken seriously, both by American platforms and by the United States government and US military.
And can I ask, and either of you can answer, who is responsible for producing the majority of these AI videos? Are these just one-off videos from someone in their basement, or are these strategically produced videos by these terror groups or by the RGC?
Well, there are several sources that produce online contents on behalf of Iran. Of course, there is the traditional bodies, the formal bodies working for the psychological warfare and the world propaganda, the global propaganda launched by Iran. They were there before, they do it now, and they did it in the past, and they probably will continue doing it. They try to transmit the propaganda they used to do in the past, and also to add some proof of the resilience of the Iranian regime despite the Israeli-US attacks on them. But in addition to the formal agencies of the Iranian regime, there are also people, individuals and groups that launch those messages. One of them that we are studying closely recently is Handala. It's an Iranian group officially not connected to the regime, but certainly an arm of the Iranian regime that launches cyber attacks and propaganda campaigns online. So you have a combination of formal agencies, groups like Handala, and individuals in the West and in Iran and in the proxy organizations that are contributing to this Iranian campaign.
And I would like to add to that, in addition to those formal groups, networks, and individuals, you also have the anti-Semites and extremists in the United States and other countries that are actually using this as an opportunity to spread their hate far and wide. So Cyberwell tracked back in June 2025, in the last war with Iran, the use of an AI tool, Suno AI, to make a very attractive song, or a very catchy song, Boom Boom Tel Aviv, that was created by Lucas Gage, a white supremacist based out of New Jersey, actually celebrating the attacks against the Israeli public and the destruction of Israeli civilian infrastructure and, of course, loss of lives, but moreover, saying that this is what the Jews deserve. So Cyberwell actually sent out real-time alerts about this specific song back in June 2025 to all of our social media platform partners, and was able to early detect that this trend made it back to the social media platforms as well. And I would say, again, it's not only about the misinformation and disinformation, it's also how this event is being used to perpetuate open anti-Semitism and calls for violence against Jews. You have to look at what is happening now in the United States and Europe. In the last weekend alone, there were 4 attacks that were leveraged against the Jewish community from Michigan to Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and even Norway. When Cyberwell looked at the rise in anti-Semitism following the start of this war on February 28th, we saw a crazy increase of the use of the hashtag and terminology, Hitler was right, reaching over 59 million people in just 10,000 posts. There's also this element of the algorithms, in this case on the platform X, actually monetizing the spread of these calls for anti-Semitism in the wake of this geopolitical escalation.
I do want to hear from both of you on your opinion. Should creating these false AI war-related videos or content in general be punishable by law?
Well, of course, the use of AI and the potential of distorting news, I would say shaking the establishment of truth in the media, of informing real reality to the public, is really a challenge. And I really think that in the future, in the near future, media, the conventional media, the old media, the traditional media, as well as the new media, and the operators and the owners of social media will have to pay attention. They certainly are starting to do now, to apply various measures to fight this manipulation of the media. One of them that I may suggest is using AI to track AI produced material. AI is not all negative, it's not all bad. And we can use AI in order to track, identify, and fight back against AI use by terrorists, terrorist states, and those who use AI to fake news.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your question about the question of should sharing generative AI that's misinformation or disinformation be punishable by law, the answer should be it depends on who you are. If you are a major social media platform, or if you're a traditional media account. So for example, Cyberwell did a deep dive into the rise of the October 7th denial campaign. Some of the perpetuators of October 7th denial, if that's rape or sexual violence denial, or even the accusation that Israel purposefully orchestrated the October 7th massacre, were perpetuated by traditional media outlets, including Al Jazeera. Now the question becomes, from a regulating the information space perspective, do we want to have a higher onus of integrity on people that we consider the guardians of truth, including traditional media platforms and how they use social media platforms? I think that it's safe to say, with the rise of generative AI and the speed at which this information is shared, especially during the fog of war and geopolitical crises, that at this point, issuing a retraction and an apology no longer cuts it. This is deeply affecting security for certain people, even for the public in the Gulf that are looking to understand where they are considered safe. This spreading of misinformation and disinformation genuinely affects lives.
We can't stop people from creating AI-generated videos, but what we could potentially stop is possibly people allowing those videos to be uploaded online. Are we aware of any emerging technology that social media giants could start adopting that potentially even before a video could go viral, the platform could flag the video as AI before it even goes live? Is there any sort of technology like that emerging?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to jump in here, Professor. Cyberwell is going to be releasing a new research that's looking at the way generative AI is being abused in order to spread anti-Semitism on social media. One of the questions that you're asking about is actually, what does governance look like in this new world of AI and social media? So the use of the watermark tool or any kind of hashing inside of videos that are made with generative AI is actually something that social media platforms already do have the ability, at least on some level, to identify and then automatically label as generated with AI. What you see in some of the instances of the more successful misinformation and disinformation pieces here with the Iran war was the use of actual footage being put into the generative AI and confusing the LLMs, confusing the AI themselves so that they were not able to verify that this was actually generative AI. So to answer your question, the technology is there. Watermarking when sources are coming from AI is absolutely one of the ways that social media can automatically flag or label at the very least that something is coming from AI. However, we do see mechanisms and open attempts to manipulate this by imbuing more authentic video into the footage.
Well, we
Professor.
did a study on the use of chatbots, and then actually we took 5 different systems, and we tried to ask questions like regular way, how to build an explosive belt, how to raise money for terrorist organizations. Of course, all these organizations, all these platforms have their own firewalls to protect them. Nevertheless, using 10 students of mine, who were all very simple users of social media, we could bypass those. And if you know the techniques, if you know what we call the jailbreakers techniques, you can easily bypass those methods. And our success rate in getting an answer, information, how to build a bomb, how to launch an attack, how to raise funds, how to recruit people to terrorist organizations, our success rate was 50%. Now, the question is, actually 2 questions. Are those people operating social media aware of the risk? Are those AI companies and operating those models that allow us to access AI? Are they aware, and do they have the motivation to block the manipulation? So I think we have to create first the awareness that there can be manipulated, that people using those chatbots can easily access information and that we don't want people to access. And then the motivation, which should be, I think, enforced in some ways of political, commercial pressure on those owners of the new platforms, that it should not be abused by terrorists or terrorist states. So create awareness, and I would say create motivation to limit the abuse of AI by future evil forces, from pedophiles to criminals, from criminals to terrorists or terrorist states.
Yeah, I would argue that I think, I just wanted to add, I would argue today that every social media platform is an AI platform and vice versa. All AI platforms are now working on their social media version of their technology. So in terms of the awareness, at least inside of the platform, I think it's absolutely there. But as the professor suggested, it's an issue of governance and creating those clear regulations in the law, because ultimately that's what's going to incentivize these platforms to really be strict about their safety mechanisms.
Well, that's all the time we have today for this panel, but I want to thank both of you for sharing these fascinating insights. I certainly learned a lot. We'll see you back very soon.
Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you. Shalom.
And with us now is our very own Steve Leibowitz, the editor-in-chief here at ILTV. Steve, it's great to see you.
India, yeah, it's good to see you too. You get to ask me anything. Go for it.
So I want to know, what is daily life now here in Israel? It's day 17 of the war. It's kind of a routine at this point. Are people going to work? Are children going to school? What's the status?
Interesting question. Today, I had to get a new microphone for ILTV, and I traveled to the industrial area of Jerusalem, expecting it to be empty. But it was packed with people. It was hard to find parking. It was business as usual. A few minutes later, I was in the home of a friend. The siren went off. We went down to the shelter. There were about 50 of us there. I didn't know anybody. My friend decided to stay where he was because he's ill, and it's kind of a long walk to get down there. Kids, parents, kids, of course, don't have school. You could call it a routine. Back to work is normal. It's not. But people are getting their daily chores done and then hurrying home. But we're in a good situation. I mean, consider what life is like in places like Tehran and Beirut today. Israel is winning this war. We have shelters. We have warning times. Our mothers and fathers are, losing sleep, and the kids are home from school, and there have been damages, and there have been injuries, and there have even been some deaths, a few deaths, and relatively speaking, compared to what it could have been if we didn't have these layers of air defense. We can We can continue on as long as we have to. The Army is now talking about 3 more weeks. That'll take us until right after the Passover holiday. So it looks like it's going to be Passover with sheltering.
COVID all over again. You know, we're not social distancing, but we're all at home. We're working from home. So it does feel reminiscent of that 2020 time era. And also you reminded me of something. I don't take for granted Israel's security technology. I didn't realize that other countries in this region don't have the alert systems that we have here in Israel. This is something unique to this country. I just learned that this is, especially in how quickly they've been able to update the systems during this war. This is something that really only exists in Israel, correct?
Correct. And we're all complaining that it's not gone far enough. We want to know if we really have to shelter, if it's going to be hitting our block. We're very demanding of our technology and of our security services and our home front command. And we complain at every opportunity we get when they don't issue a warning. Today there was a case where no early warning went off, only the siren came, and so the strike was very quick after, I think in Ashkelon, for example. We're way ahead of the rest of the world in this, certainly. Although I remember being in the U.S. and getting a tornado warning on my phone that shocked me, and I had to take cover there too. So these things are in place in well-developed countries when they have to go into effect for all sorts of disasters. And what we're in is basically similar to a natural disaster, except you don't know where it's going to strike. It's like a storm, but it could hit any part of the country at any time.
1 in 3 Israelis have no shelter in their home. And that's been a huge concern during this war. I mean, most of the people getting injured during this war are, as we know, are not from missiles, but from people running to shelter, many elderly. How do you think Israel's going to move forward for the next wars? Are they going to start ramping up their shelter building in the coming months when this war is over?
We have a siren now, just so you know. Siren is going off. I may have to stay on the line and speak while you head to shelter. I'm not sure if you've gotten the alert. I have gotten an alert. I still have about 12 minutes to head to my shelter. I think we may be off the air before that the missile arrives in Jerusalem, so I'll have time, not to worry.
Yeah, we also do have that alert. It looks like we do have some time. I'm speaking to my producer. Yes, we do have some time. We'll wrap up very soon in just 10 seconds. Actually, we're going to wrap up right now. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Get to safety, and we will as well.
India, you did great. Good to see you guys.
That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm India Naftali. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Nadar Gavelazi, and coming up in today's newscast. Operation Roaring Lion enters its 3rd week as Israel says the war is escalating. U.S. President Donald Trump indicates the war will continue for as long as necessary. And is Israel heading for a ground invasion of Lebanon? Today, we have entered the 3rd week of Operation Roaring Lion and Operation Epic Fury, which began with joint U.S. and Israeli strikes on the Islamic Republic of Iran. And on day 16, the war rages on, with Israeli officials now estimating it will take a few more weeks to conclude. There are dramatic developments as the United States and Israel continue striking and degrading the Iranian regime's capabilities while fighting to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. And as Israel continues to receive incoming missile fire throughout the country from both Iran and Lebanon. Meanwhile, the IDF released information marking 2 weeks of the operation and divulging that the Air Force carried out over 7,600 strikes in over 400 waves. About 4,700 strikes have been against the Iranian missile program alone. The Army said thousands of terror operatives have been eliminated as well. It estimated between 4,000 and 5,000 Iranian soldiers had been neutralized, not to mention the senior leadership of the IRGC and the supreme leader himself. Meanwhile, the United States says it has struck over 6,000 targets and sunk dozens of Iranian Navy vessels. And on the northern front, is Israel heading towards war or towards a potential historic peace treaty with Lebanon that could include official recognition of the State of Israel? We'll get into all of this and more. And in the meantime, the Israel Defense Forces says its air campaign inside Iran is intensifying, with more than 200 targets struck in the past day alone. Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Katz indicated that the war will continue, and the objectives include potential regime change. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
The IDF says Israeli Air Force jets hit dozens of ballistic missile launchers, including some that were armed and ready to fire toward Israel. Additional targets included air defense systems, missile launch sites, and weapons storage facilities. The IDF says many of the strikes were focused specifically on Iranian missile launchers in an effort to reduce the scale of attacks on Israeli territory.
המאבק העולמי והאזורי מול איראן, אותו מובילים נשיא ארצות הברית דונלד טראמפ וראש ממשלת ישראל בנימין נתניהו, עולה מדרגה ונכנס לישורת ההכרעה שתימשך ככל שיידרש.
Israeli aircraft also targeted a facility linked to the intelligence branch of Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, which collects and analyzes intelligence for the Iranian regime. The Army says the site was struck while several senior intelligence officials were present, although damage assessments are still underway. The strikes are part of Operation Roaring Lion, the large-scale campaign targeting Iran's missile and military capabilities.
And the United States is also escalating its military campaign against Iran, striking targets on Kharj Island, the country's main oil export terminal, while President Trump is now vowing to keep open the Strait of Hormuz amid Iranian efforts to block and target shipping in the vital trade route. U.S. President Donald Trump says American forces totally obliterated Iranian military targets on the Kharg Island, which handles around 90% of Iran's oil exports. Trump said oil facilities were spared for now, but warned they could be targeted if Iran continues to threaten shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Trump indicated that the attack on Iran will continue as long as he thinks is necessary.
How long now do you think the war is likely to last?
I can't tell you that. I mean, I have my own idea, but what good does it do? It'll be as long as it's necessary. They've been decimated. Their country's in bad shape. The whole thing is collapsing.
Iran responded by striking several U.S. and Gulf targets. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said any attack on Iran's energy infrastructure would trigger retaliatory strikes on regional energy facilities linked to the United States. The president also said multiple countries may send warships to help protect oil tankers, including China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom. Trump said the U.S. will ensure the strait is open, safe, and free one way or the other, adding that American forces could strike Iranian positions along the shoreline if shipping continues to be threatened.
When will the Navy start escorting tankers to the Strait of Hormuz?
Oil prices have surged more than 40% since the war began, as Iran has laid mines and attacked ships in the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway used by about 20% of the world's oil shipments. Traffic through the strait remains nearly halted, with the United States and its allies still weighing whether to deploy warships to escort tankers through the strategic channel. And not just Iran. On the northern front, Israel is intensifying its campaign against Hezbollah, with airstrikes targeting the terrorist assets all over Lebanon, while expanding ground operations in southern Lebanon. The IDF has reportedly readied plans for a major ground incursion up to the Litani River. Devo Klein has the details.
The IDF continued intensive airstrikes across Lebanon over the past day, hitting Hezbollah rocket launchers, weapons depots, and command sites. Some targets were even ready for immediate attacks on Israeli communities. Ground troops have stepped up operations, killing dozens of Hezbollah operatives in targeted raids and destroying infrastructure, including weapons depots, command centers, and observation posts along the border. Despite heavy losses, Hezbollah is estimated to still retain about 20% of its pre-war capabilities, including precision rockets and thousands of short-range rockets aimed at northern Israel.
Hezbollah מרגיש את נחת זרוענו, ועוד ירגיש אותה ביתר שאת, הוא ישלם מחיר כבד מאוד על תוקפנותו.
The IDF has reportedly readied a major ground offensive south of the Litani River, aimed at pushing Hezbollah further away from the border and destroying tunnel networks and weapons depots in an operation likely to mirror the campaign in Gaza.
אני הזהרתי את נשיא לבנון שאם ממשלת לבנון לא יודעת לשלוט על השטח ולמנוע מהחיזבאללה לאיים על יישובי הצפון ולירות לעבר ישראל, אנחנו ניקח את השטח ונעשה את זה בעצמנו. ראש הממשלה ואני הנחינו את צה"ל להיערך להרחבת פעילות צה"ל בלבנון ולהשבת השקט והביטחון ליישובי הצפון.
And joining us now with the latest on Operation Roaring Lion, now 3 weeks into the war, is Colonel Miri Eisen, Senior Fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism. Thank you so much for joining us.
As always, glad to be here.
So a lot of incredible accomplishments for the United States and for Israel. What is your assessment of the war now that it's entering its third week?
One of the things that happens after such a long time is that we feel as if it's stagnant. But that has to do just with the fact that, yes, you're tired, I'm tired. There are still those single missiles that Iran is managing to fire at Israel. But let's be clear. The Islamic regime over the last 3 weeks, we can see the clear deterioration in the sense that they cannot fire the rockets that they want to. The numbers are down. That has to do with the actions taken by the Israeli Defense Forces, by the U.S. forces, against launchers, against the different sites. We're hearing more and more about people deserting their different sites because they understand that they are going to be attacked. If a missile launcher is used against us, that immediately puts off that kind of footage that you're showing right now. Afterwards, they're going to go and attack that launcher. So it's taking it step by step. It takes a really long breath to be able to withstand all of this, but I do see that we are doing in such a way much better than before, and it is having a long-term effect.
Now, we heard from U.S. President Donald Trump, who said recently that Israel and the United States have different objectives in the war. It's really the first time we've heard any kind of hint at sort of a potential daylight or different sort of objectives in this war between Washington and Jerusalem. At the same time, Trump said the war would continue as long as necessary. I mean, what do you make of this?
To me, from the beginning, we always have to remember, and Lidar, I think sometimes we forget this, the United States of America is a world power. The United States of America has a military unlike any other. Yes, we're Israel. We're certainly a regional power, and we've shown enormous capabilities over these last 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks. But when we talk about it at the end, the United States is looking at the entire world. We're looking right now at Israel within our borders. We are being attacked directly, cross-border attacks from Hezbollah in Lebanon into Israel. We are directly being attacked by the Islamic regime from Iran into Israel. So that's always going to have that difference, and I don't see it as a bad thing. The United States is the world power. They are the lead in that sense. What's happening in the Straits of Hormuz absolutely impacts the entire world economy, not just Israel. We are much more disturbed about our existential threats, the Islamic regime and its continuity, and Hezbollah holding all of those weapons that they received from the Islamic regime of Iran and using them against us.
Now, do you see an end to this war in sight? You know, a lot of people are talking about an exit strategy. Is there an exit strategy? Isn't there? In your opinion, is there a clear exit strategy or an end to this war in sight?
when you start a campaign, you don't necessarily know exactly when it ends. There's the other side, and look at what the other side did. Iran, yes, absolutely, we attacked their military targets, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, all of the places that they were preparing for the proxies and for themselves, the annihilation, destruction of the State of Israel. But what Iran did is went and attacked everywhere, Lidar. I mean, they've attacked Oman and Bahrain, United Arab Emirates and Kuwait, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, Iraq and Jordan, Turkey, Cyprus, Azerbaijan. Every time I say all of these places, Iran chose to attack them. I don't know that anybody before this started thought that Iran's response would be to attack all of the countries in the greater Middle East and beyond. And that immediately means that this war doesn't look the exact same as when you started it. You're still targeting the same targets. That aim is the same. From the beginning, I've questioned the capability of the air campaign, which is what's being done for the change of regime. But I still think that that is absolutely a goal. I just don't think it can be achieved by the air campaign. What the air campaign does is it greatly weakens the central government, their capability to rule, their capability to send out those internal police that murdered 30,000 people at the end of December and during January in protests against them. So again, one stage at a time. We want it to be clear end game. I think that the military targets are clear. I think that the change of regime is something that not only takes time, but you don't do it from an air campaign. You hope that they have the oomph, they have the capability to do it from within.
And I want to pivot now to talk about Lebanon and Iran's terror proxy, Hezbollah. You know, there's a lot of talk about what's happening there. Do you think Israel is heading towards war with Lebanon, towards a ground invasion? Or are we heading towards a historic peace treaty?
One of the interesting things on coming here on a Sunday is that it could be either. Right now, Hezbollah is hand in hand with its patron, with the one that gives it its ideology, its training, its weapons, and that is the Islamic regime. They chose, again, just like Iran chose to go and attack dozen different countries that have nothing to do with what's going on right now, Hezbollah chose to attack Israel. Hezbollah made a clear choice when they did that, Lidar. They said, we are going with the Islamic regime of Iran and not with Lebanon, the country that we live in, that we're born in, the Arabic that we speak. Lebanon as a country, their own leadership have spoken out clearly and said what Hezbollah is doing is not just against the law, they outlawed them. They've actually had quite clear voices against Hezbollah. That's why you have both the opening for dialogue. The president of Lebanon, as you can see, spoke openly and said, I'm willing to sit down at the table, willing to talk with the Israelis. Yes, he wants us to immediately stop fighting. But that's the opening to something that we haven't ever heard from a Lebanese president. But hand in hand, what am I supposed to say right now to my friends who live up on the northern border, who are being attacked as we speak by Hezbollah rockets, all of them arriving from Iran, and the Lebanese don't do anything against that. So there's talk and there's hope. I really hope that we go forward with this dialogue, but we can't stop right now defending the north against this threat of Hezbollah.
Absolutely. So still a lot of threats remain. The war continues, but it's looking good. Colonel Miri Eisen, thank you so much for joining us and for your analysis today.
Thank you so much.
And moving on, it was another tense day and a long night across Israel as air defense systems were activated and emergency teams responded to multiple alerts throughout the country. Our correspondent India Naftali has the report.
Israel remained under intermittent missile and rocket fire from Iran and Hezbollah today and over the weekend as the war enters its third week. Air raid sirens sounded across central and northern Israel, sending millions of residents into shelters after ballistic missiles were fired from Iran, with most of the incoming threats intercepted by Israel's air defense systems. In the south, an Iranian missile struck near the city of Eilat, injuring a 12-year-old boy who is now listed in moderate condition, while 2 others were lightly hurt. Earlier in the weekend, Iranian missiles carrying cluster munitions hit several locations in central Israel, including Shoham, Holon, and Rishon LeZion, causing damage but no casualties.
As we see, one of the missiles hit right here in this neighborhood and made a lot of damage. I can say that nobody was hurt, but we can see the cars, we can see the damage over here.
Plus, last week, President Isaac Herzog visited a Muslim village in northern Israel after a projectile strike damaged a house and vehicle.
We will not cave in. The Iranians have a big mistake if they think it can hamper or change our course of weakening them substantially and bringing, hopefully, a different future for the Middle East.
And as missile attacks continue across Israel, the country's emergency teams are on constant alert. Our correspondent India Naftali went inside Magen David Adom's command center to see just how first responders prepare for the next call. Let's take a look.
Right now, we are in the underground command center of Israel's National Emergency Service, Magen David Adom. They're the first to respond to direct hits from Iranian missiles, and they operate from this underground dispatch center. Magen David Adom, otherwise known as MADA, is responsible by law for responding to any medical emergency across the country. So what does happen when an emergency strikes? We found out during our visit. The Home Front Command has alerted us that there is an Iranian missile barrage coming towards central Israel. Can you walk me through what happens as soon as that red alert goes off?
First of all, we have alert systems that we're combined with the Home Front Command, so we get an alert of an area that we're expecting to see a missile potentially strike. It's the area that will then, in a couple of minutes, receive alerts that the general population will then start heading to shelters. What we'll see on the maps, we can't show you on the actual maps at the moment for security reasons, but we'll have an indication of where we're likely to see something happen. So we can start sending teams to the scene even before we've started receiving emergency calls.
On this occasion, there were no direct hits and no injuries from the incoming Iranian missiles. But in the past, MADA has responded to major disasters. Right here is an intensive care bus. There are 7 beds in it in the case of a severe emergency. In June of last year, during Israel's last war with Iran, the Soroka hospital in southern Israel was struck by an Iranian missile. More than 80 people were injured and over 100 patients had to be evacuated. These buses here were used to evacuate larger numbers of wounded from Soroka hospital, whereas a regular ambulance can maybe only take 1 at a time. MADA also holds Israel's national blood supply for both civilians and the IDF. It is stored here in a highly fortified bunker. Since the war began, the blood bank has been moved even further underground to keep it safe. But what is remarkable about this entire operation is that it is almost entirely funded by donations. And for now, during this war, MADA teams remain on standby, ready to respond to any incoming attack or emergency that may come.
We've had all of our emergency vehicles have been manned since the first moments of Operation Roaring Lion. If on a regular shift we'll have between 300 and 400 ambulances on shift, what we've got at the moment is almost 2,000 ambulances out on the streets, ready to respond to whatever happens.
And as missiles rain down across Israel, reaching safety and managing daily life during war is far harder for people with disabilities. During this war, mobility challenges leave some families living almost entirely inside their bomb shelters, unable to reach food, medicine, or essential care. For 35 years, Chimes Israel has helped children and adults with disabilities through therapy, essential care, and employment support. But now, because of the war, children with disabilities are losing critical therapies, and adults are losing daily structure and human contact. Even some staff members' homes have been destroyed by attacks, and yet they continue serving the people who depend on them. Chimes Israel needs your help during this war to deliver therapy, medicine, food, and essentials directly to families' homes. It also needs to build a protected shelter for vulnerable preschoolers. In times like these, we are called to stand with the most vulnerable among us. So please do not forget the children and adults with disabilities in Israel during this war. Your help today can make all the difference. And moving on, Israel and Lebanon may be heading toward direct talks in the coming days as French-led international efforts intensify to end the fighting with Hezbollah. The French ceasefire proposal reportedly included a formal Lebanese recognition of Israel. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
France and the U.S. are reportedly pushing for direct talks between Israel and Lebanon, possibly in Paris or Cyprus, to reach a ceasefire and long-term security deal. The diplomatic plan reportedly includes formal Lebanese recognition of Israel and deployment of the Lebanese armed forces south of the Litani River to take responsibility for disarming Hezbollah. On the American side, Jared Kushner is reportedly leading the effort, while Israel would be represented by former Minister Ron Dermer, if talks proceed. Israel has yet to formally respond to the French-led overture. French President Macron has offered to host the talks in Paris and has discussed the initiative with Lebanese President Joseph Aoun. Macron says he is moving for urgent action to prevent chaos in Lebanon and calls on Hezbollah to halt its operations. The talks come as Israel continues to focus on its military campaign against Hezbollah on the northern front after Hezbollah launched missiles and drones at Israel since shortly after the start of the U.S.-Israel attack on Iran.
And in other news, the Israel Defense Forces say troops killed a Palestinian gunman who opened fire during operations in Rafah earlier today. Soldiers from the paratroopers brigade were clearing Hamas infrastructure when the armed terror operative opened fire. Troops then returned fire, killing him. No IDF soldiers were injured. And in a separate strike on Friday in Khan Yunis, the IDF killed 2 armed Hamas operatives. Separately in Judea, the IDF demolished the home of Azmi Nader Abu Khalil, responsible for the December 2024 El Kader Junction terror attack that killed 12-year-old Yoshua Aaron Tuvia Simcha and injured 3 others. The house was located in Dura, southwest of Hebron. And most of the country remains closed to home, with schools closed and frequent need to shelter. The Homefront Command says some schools will be allowed to reopen from tomorrow in areas considered at lower risk from attacks by Iran and Hezbollah. Following a new security assessment, the Homefront Command says restrictions will be eased in the parts of the country, including Bet Shean Valley, Jordan Valley, Judea and Samaria, the Dead Sea region, Western Negev, Southern Negev, and the Arava. In those areas, schools can operate only if adequate shelters are available that can be reached quickly in case of sirens. And indoor gatherings of up to 100 people and 50 people outdoors will also be permitted under the same conditions. However, in most of the country, still remains under greater threat. Schools will remain closed and students will continue remote learning. Education Minister Yoav Kish says the move represents a targeted and phased reopening based on different threat levels across the country. Military officials stress that even in the lower risk areas, missile attacks and sirens are, of course, still possible. And our final story this evening, extreme weather swept across Israel over the weekend as strong winds and heavy dust blanketed much of the country. The storm was followed by overnight rain and thunderstorms, mainly in northern and central Israel. Strong winds were also recorded with gusts reaching around 90 kilometers per hour in the Negev and up to 95 kilometers per hour in Samaria. On the coast, visibility was reduced to just a few hundred meters, while air quality monitors reported very high levels of dust particles. Now conditions are finally beginning to shift. And with that, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies and partly rain showers are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 11 degrees Celsius or 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see partly cloudy skies alongside steady temperatures with highs of 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's at ILTV_Israel on all platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Govelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.
And now a break from all of this news about war. It's International Women's Day, and a new report released for this day shows that while more women are entering Israel's high-tech sector, major gaps in pay, leadership, and entrepreneurship remain. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has the story.
A new report from the Israel Innovation Authority paints a mixed picture of women in Israel's high-tech industry. Significant progress in education and employment, but stubborn gaps in pay, leadership, and entrepreneurship that have barely shifted in decades. According to the report, women now account for about 34% of Israel's high-tech workforce, roughly 135,000 employees. That share, however, has remained largely unchanged for nearly 30 years, even as the sector itself has expanded dramatically. One of the most striking findings is the wage gap. On average, women working in high-tech earn around 23,000 shekels per month, compared to 33,000 shekels for men, a difference of about 44%. The gap persists even within the same types of jobs. In research and development roles, men earn roughly 44% more than women, while in headquarters roles, the gap grows to nearly 48%. At senior management levels, the disparities become even larger. At the same time, the pipeline of women entering technology fields has expanded sharply. Over the past decade, the number of female students studying high-tech disciplines in Israeli universities and colleges has increased by 116%, driven largely by growth in computer science programs. Still, women make up only about 34% of students in high-tech fields and remain significantly underrepresented in core engineering disciplines such as electrical and mechanical engineering. The gaps begin even earlier. In Israel's high schools, only about 1/3 of students taking advanced computer science exams are girls, even though boys and girls participate in advanced mathematics at nearly equal rates. The report also highlights disparities in leadership and entrepreneurship. Women account for just 16% of development managers in high-tech companies and fewer than 11% of startup CEOs. When it comes to investment, the numbers are even smaller. Only about 8% of funding rounds in recent years involve companies led by female CEOs. The Innovation Authority warns that if these gaps persist, Israel risks leaving a significant portion of its talent untapped. Officials say closing the gap will require action across the entire pipeline, from encouraging girls to study technology in school to expanding opportunities for women in management, entrepreneurship, and decision-making roles across the high-tech ecosystem.
As missiles rain down across Israel, reaching safety and managing daily life during war is far harder for people with disabilities. Now, during this war, mobility challenges leave some families living almost entirely inside their bomb shelters, unable to reach food, medicine, and essential care. For 35 years, Chimes Israel has helped children and adults with disabilities through therapy, essential care, and employment support. Because of this war, children with disabilities are losing critical therapies and adults are losing daily structure and human contact. Even some staff members' homes have been destroyed by attacks, yet they continue serving the people who depend on them. Chimes Israel needs your help during this war to deliver therapy, medicine, and food, and essentials directly to families' homes. It also needs to build a protected shelter for vulnerable preschoolers. In times like these, we are called to stand with the most vulnerable among us. Please, do not forget the children and adults with disabilities in Israel during this war. Your help could make a difference.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth. Another week in the bomb shelter here in Israel as the war to take down the Islamic regime wages on. But is it enough? The American and Israeli military campaign is seeing stunning success, but it's not over yet, and there are key mistakes that can sabotage the whole operation. And now I'm going to explain what not to do to ruin this opportunity from the perspective of the West. As I mentioned, the military campaign so far has focused on eliminating key leadership, targeting IRGC bases, sabotaging the nuclear program, and more recently, targeting the IRGC's energy assets. Now, Israeli and American strikes have targeted command infrastructure and air defenses, as well as drone facilities, weapons depots, and key military complexes tied to the regime's regional operations, with over 3,000 sites already hit. according to CENTCOM, and over 7,000 IRGC and Iranian military casualties so far. But the campaign is now entering a second phase, with both countries stating it will last between 1 to 2 weeks for this phase. The focus now is shifting towards dismantling two pillars of the regime's power. First, the ballistic missile program, and second, the internal repression machinery that's run by the IRGC. Now, this matters because for decades, the Islamic Republic invested enormous resources into building the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. These missiles were never meant to be purely defensive weapons. They were designed to threaten Israel, to threaten American forces across the region, and eventually to extend that threat even further into Europe and even the U.S. mainland through the development of ICBMs. But not so fast, mullahs. The facilities tied to that program are now being systematically targeted. Now, that includes major military complexes like Parchin, where it's long been associated with missile development and military research as well. At the same time, the campaigns also honing in on the regime's tools of internal repression. The IRGC isn't just a military force. It operates intelligence networks and paramilitary units, as well as surveillance systems that exist primarily to control the Iranian population. Now, these are the same structures that beat protesters in the streets, that arrest journalists and enforce the regime's social restrictions on women. Dismantling those institutions is critical. It's essential if the Iranian people are ever going to have the opportunity to determine their own future. But even when the military strategy is working, the political strategy can still go terribly wrong. And this week we saw 3 warning signs that show exactly how the West could still screw this up. The first issue is territorial integrity. Now, over the past few days, rumors have been circulating, suggesting that Kurdish forces from Iraq might attempt to enter western Iran, or that foreign powers might even encourage these separatist movements inside the country during the war. Let me be very, very clear about something. Dividing the territory of Iran is absolutely unacceptable to almost all Iranians. Even Iranians who despise the Islamic Republic overwhelmingly support territorial integrity of their country. This is not a regime position, it's a national identity position, which is why the regime has used this myth of Israel wanting to divide Iran for years to drum up fear amongst the people. If the West were perceived as trying to break Iran apart territorially, it would immediately unite many Iranians against both the United States and the State of Israel. Israelis and the Jewish community, just to understand how sensitive this issue is for Iranians, imagine for a second that someone was proposing Israel should give away Jerusalem as part of a political solution. That's how explosive the idea of partitioning Iran is for most Iranians. It's simply not negotiable. And that's why it's so important to hear Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu clearly say this week that Israel does not seek to divide Iran.
כי איננו מבקשים לחלק את איראן. אנחנו מבקשים לשחרר את איראן. לשחרר אותה מעול העריצות ולחיות עמה בשלום.
Now, that clarity matters. However, Israel does maintain strategic relationships with Kurdish groups in places like Iraq and Syria. Those relationships developed because Kurdish forces there have often been important partners against Islamist threats in those specific countries. But that is a far, far cry from supporting separatism inside Iran itself. Those are two completely different situations. Now, after the initial rumors broke, President Trump also addressed this issue and made it clear he had warned the Kurdish forces in Iraq not to enter the conflict, recognizing that such a move could destabilize the situation even further.
We're not looking to the Kurds going in. We're very friendly with the Kurds, as you know, but we don't want to make the war any more complex than it already is. No.
Ruled that out?
We don't want, I have ruled it out. I don't want the Kurds going in.
The West needs to remember that if the goal here is to support the Iranian people against this regime and enable them to reclaim their country, the West can't be trying to dismantle the Iranian nation itself, nor even appear as if they're trying to either. Now, the second mistake the West must avoid right now is empowering or even amplifying these fake opposition groups. Now, for decades, Western governments and media outlets have repeatedly misidentified who actually represents the Iranian people. from regime lobbyists to the most notorious example, the Mujahideen, or MEK, which I exposed for what they really are just a few weeks ago on this show. Now, this group began as a strange mix of Marxist and Islamist ideology and was even listed as a foreign terror organization by the United States. They played a key role in the early revolutionary coalition that ultimately helped Ayatollah Khomeini come to power in 1979. Before later falling out with the regime. Now, today, the organization attempts to portray itself as a democratic alternative to the Islamic Republic, particularly through their front organization or organizations. In the U.S., it's NCRI, National Council of Resistance of Iran. But their ideology is anything but democratic. Inside Iran, the group has almost no legitimacy whatsoever and is despised by the public, in part because of its alliance with Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq War. Despite this, the MEK has spent years cultivating Western politicians and lobbying networks. Their leader, Maryam Rajavi, frequently appears at conferences that are attended by former Western officials who love to portray the group as a viable future leadership for Iran. Except it's not. MEK even had the audacity this week to declare an imaginary government in exile. Government of whom? Because the Iranian people aren't with you, MEK. That's for sure. These groups claim to speak for Iranians while actively trying to divide the country and silence voices of actual Iranians inside of it. And unfortunately, some Western media outlets continue to amplify these fringe groups as if they have any real legitimacy. This week, the Financial Times ran a profile of MEK, and OAN also featured interviews with the group, presenting them, falsely, as the Iranian opposition. They are not. This is a problem that the West keeps repeating. The loudest voices in exile politics are often mistaken for the voices of the Iranian people themselves. Which brings us to the third mistake that the West absolutely must avoid: the so-called reformist solution. For years, Western governments convinced themselves that the Islamic Republic contained moderates who could gradually reform the system from within. But the truth is that the regime itself engineered this reformist narrative. The reformist label functions as a diplomatic tool. It allows the regime to present a softer face to Western audiences while at the same time maintaining an authoritarian structure that continues to operate inside Iran. We've seen this cycle many times before. Figures like Hassan Rouhani, Javad Zarif, and even the current president of the regime, Masoud Pezeshkian, are all marketed internationally as moderates. Western governments embrace them as evidence that the regime might in fact evolve. Yet throughout those years, the supreme leader retained ultimate authority over everything. The IRGC expanded its economic and military power, and repression inside Iran continued. And when you look at the record of many of these so-called reformists, the contradictions become obvious. Take Masoud Pezeshkian. In Western interviews, he's presented himself as someone who supports relaxing the mandatory hijab laws and even easing some social restrictions. But when he actually held authority inside the Iranian system, he enforced those exact same restrictions. During his time overseeing parts of the country's medical system, he himself imposed strict hijab requirements in hospitals and in medical institutions even before those policies were formally codified into law. In other words, when he had power, he did exactly what the regime hardliners would have done. He enforced the policies that he later claimed should be reformed. And this week provided another example. Pezeshkian publicly stated that the regime would stop firing missiles at Arab states in the region, and even apologized. But only hours later, Iranian forces launched missiles again towards Arab states, including attacks directed at Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. That contradiction should tell you everything that you need to know about this reformist narrative. One set of statements for Western audiences, and another set of actions on the ground. Reformists function as a communications layer for the regime. They provide the talking points that Western politicians and journalists can point to as evidence that the Islamic Republic might someday change or be negotiating partners. But the core power structure of the regime remains untouched: the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, which is the overarching concept of the Islamic regime itself, that all power rests in the hands of the supreme religious leader, who just this week has been named as Ali Khamenei's son, Mojtaba. As long as the same system of repression continues inside the country under this structure, there will be no change in Iran, whether a reformist leads or not. In fact, placing a reformist as a figurehead probably makes it even more likely that the regime will survive. If the goal is to end the regime's ability to terrorize its own population and threaten the entire region, then the focus must remain on dismantling the structures that sustain the regime itself, particularly the IRGC, and of course, the broader security state. Ultimately, the future of Iran can only be decided by the Iranian people, not by President Trump or by anyone else, because one thing is already clear: ignoring what those people are actually saying or attempting to impose artificial political solutions from outside will only prolong the conflict and increase the risk of internal chaos. The military campaign may be weakening the regime, but the political strategy that follows is what will determine whether that moment is actually going to lead to freedom or whether the West once again repeats the same mistakes it's made in Iran for decades. Now, while the Islamic regime is losing those missile sites and rapidly, as well as their leaders, something else has erupted across many Western cities and in Western media: a wave of manufactured outrage campaigns being branded to the public as anti-war protests. But when you actually look at who's organizing many of these demonstrations, who is funding them, and what message they're pushing, it becomes very clear that this isn't an organic peace movement concerned about the well-being of Iranians or Americans. It's a network of anti-American activist organizations and media figures who are running a parallel information campaign to shield the Islamic regime from any kind of accountability while trying to breed resentment against the United States and Israel. It's the exact same subversion narrative that we've seen promoted after October 7th against Israel, only now they're more explicitly turning it against the Iranian people and the United States itself. In New York City, for example, one of the main organizers of these protests has been the People's Forum. It's a socialist activist group that works closely with a network of organizations, including the Answer Coalition, NIAC, the mouthpiece of the Islamic regime which lobbies in Washington, D.C., Code Pink, and the Palestinian Youth Movement, which has ties to the PFLP, a terror group. Many of these groups have been at the center of most of the largest anti-Israel and anti-American demonstrations in the past few years, and they operate as a paid protest infrastructure that mobilizes demonstrations across multiple cities within hours of a geopolitical event. The concerning part is that many of these organizations are connected through a funding network linked to Neville Roy Singham, a tech billionaire based in Shanghai who has financed a web of radical left-wing media outlets and political organizations promoting anti-Western narratives. Now, Singham funds Code Pink, the Answer Coalition, the People's Forum, and God knows what else. Now, not only does he happen to be married to the co-founder of Code Pink, Jody Evans, but he also funds many media outlets with close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. He frequents CCP events in China, and multiple investigations into this network have raised serious questions about how these groups consistently amplify messaging aligned coincidentally with the geopolitical interests of the Chinese government. Must just be a coincidence, right? The hypocrisy of this movement becomes even more obvious when you look at what it's been silent about for many years. The Islamic Republic has been executing political prisoners, imprisoning journalists, and brutally crushing protests for decades. In the 1980s alone, more than 30,000 political prisoners were executed by the regime. In 2022, the IRGC poisoned hundreds of schoolgirls across the country in order to limit protests. And in January, the Islamic regime murdered approximately 36,000 more protesters, including hundreds of children, and many, many more are being tortured in prisons today. Where were the mass demonstrations in New York City demanding justice for those girls? Where were the rallies in London calling for an end to the regime responsible for that terror? But now that regime's military infrastructure is being targeted. Many of the same activists who spent years burning American flags and denouncing the United States as an imperial power and protesting on the streets against Israel have suddenly discovered a passionate concern for the safety of American soldiers. How convenient. What we're also seeing this week is that this same protest movement has a media equivalent because many of the same bogus talking points being shouted in the streets are now being repeated by commentators across both the left and the right. And the result is a remarkable convergence of disinformation and bad faith arguments that are being fed to the American public. It's the horseshoe theory in action. On the left, people like Cenk Uygur responded to the assassination of Khamenei by calling him courageous for standing up to Israel. Courageous? The supreme leader of a theocratic regime that jails women for their clothing and executes protesters is now being described as courageous by a self-described American progressive? How can someone be so obsessed with Jews that their brain is visibly rotting like this? But he isn't alone. His co-host, Temper Tantrum Anna Kasparian, was asked directly on Piers Morgan's program whether she would condemn Khamenei following Cenk's irresponsible comments. Take a look.
He called the Ayatollah courageous because he hadn't gone on his knees to Israel. Did you agree? I mean, do you think the Ayatollah Khamenei was a courageous man?
Well, he never capitulated to the Israelis, and we live under a government where, regardless of which party is in power, is on its knees on behalf of Israel.
So instead of doing so, she literally refused and started blabbering on about Israel and claiming that thousands of protesters being killed by the Islamic Republic is Zionist propaganda. But if you think this kind of commentary is limited to the left, think again. On the right, we have Qatar's darling Tucker Carlson, who spent the whole week pushing the claim that confronting the Islamic regime will somehow lead to thousands of American deaths, and more recently, claiming the bizarre claim that surrender by the Islamic Republic means condoning U.S. military raping Iranian women. Tucker's breakdown, of course, conveniently ignores the fact that this same regime has spent decades funding militias that have already killed American soldiers and have even participated in plots to assassinate American officials for 47 years and counting. But okay. Then there's Dave Smith, who appeared on Piers Morgan's program again and declared that the United States and Israel are the worst terrorist organizations in the world. Take a look.
The IDF is the worst terrorist organization in the region. Let's get real. The United States of America is arguably the worst terrorist organization in the world. If you want to look over the last 25 years, how many innocent civilians we've slaughtered. You're getting us into the neocon. Yeah, that's right. You're getting us into the neocon seventh war, which they've been dying for the last 25 years.
You might want to take down, by the way.
No, actually, if you love this country, if you're a real patriot, you'd have to hate this government.
What's striking about that statement, and really all of Dave's deluded analysis of foreign policy, is that it requires completely erasing the historical record of how nations act. And yes, in this case, the Islamic Republic itself. Decades of missile attacks, proxy warfare, assassination plots, and attacks on American troops disappear from the story in favor of a narrative where the West is always the aggressor and authoritarian regimes are always the victims. Dave's assumptions rest on faulty premises that everyone, if given the chance, will act rationally, or as we perceive to be rational in the Western world. This is the dangerously naive Western mistake that we so frequently see from both the left and right. Dave's libertarian fantasy is rooted in luxury beliefs that don't apply outside of a society with strong institutions and the rule of law. Dave's puny little mind can't fathom that there are, in fact, bad actors in this world motivated by Islamist extremism, and therefore it must be the West's fault that they are the way they are. This is, as history has repeatedly shown, entirely inaccurate. When you step back and look at this entire landscape, the most striking thing is how indistinguishable the talking points have become. The far left and parts of the far right are now repeating nearly identical claims about this war. They focus obsessively on small incidents while ignoring the bigger strategic threat. They fearmonger about hypothetical American casualties, blaming Israel for a fight that's clearly America's, all while ignoring the fact that the regime they are defending has already spent decades exporting violence across the region and beyond. So while these protesters march through Western cities and these commentators argue on television and social media, it is worth remembering that one group of people whose voices are largely missing from these conversations: the Iranian people themselves. Because those people have been risking their lives for years to end this regime that these protest movements and commentators now seemed determined to protect. Well, moving on to the good, the bad, and the ugly stories of the week. Before we finish up, we're going to kick it off with the ugly. This week in Australia, we saw young women whose crime was refusing to sing a song for a regime that oppresses them. This week during the Women's Asian Cup in Australia, members of the Iranian women's national football team refused to sing the national anthem of the Islamic Republic before their match. Now, it was a quiet but powerful act of protest, but that was enough to trigger fury from the regime. Iranian state media immediately attacked the players, calling them wartime traitors and accusing them of disloyalty during a time of conflict. Now, commentators who are close to the regime demanded that the players be held accountable when they return home to Iran, and human rights activists and Iranian dissidents quickly warned that the team could face serious consequences and repercussions on an individual level if they're forced back to Iran. So following this debacle, reports also emerged that the players were being closely monitored during their time at the tournament by regime officials traveling with them, and even that their families back in Iran could face pressure or intimidation from authorities, something that the regime has a long history of doing. Meanwhile, Iranians in the diaspora have been raising the alarm about the team's safety and calling on Australia to offer protection to the players if they fear returning home. Now, so far, the Australian government has accepted the defections of 5 of the players, granting them asylum. But the pressure really mounted after President Trump got involved and called on Australia to help them ensure the entire team had the ability to stay. And if not, then the United States would accept them if Australia did not. Now, this development followed the disturbing footage of players saying help in sign language from the bus windows of the team bus. This was prompting protesters at the scene to stop the bus from leaving physically. But Australian authorities intervened and prevented the protesters from blocking the bus, allowing them to go back to their hotel. The tragic reality is if those girls are returned to Iran, they will absolutely face consequences. In fact, some of them are probably too scared to even defect right now due to the pressure on their families. Australia and all the international community cannot allow the Islamic regime to continue this long-standing persecution of its top athletes in this way. And our bad story of the week is something that would be absurd if it wasn't real. While Iranians around the world, even inside Iran, were celebrating the end of one of the most brutal dictators of the last half-century, small groups of activists in some Western cities were doing the exact opposite. They were holding public gatherings to mourn him. In the United Kingdom, a candlelight vigil for Ali Khamenei was held in Manchester, organized around the Islamic Center of Manchester, which is funded by the regime, of course, where around 100 people gathered to commemorate the dead supreme terrorist. Similar tributes were also reported in other parts of the UK, including some of the events connected to different mosques, as well as different student Islamic societies, with some university groups even posting messages calling Khamenei a martyr and urging followers to pray for him. Seriously. And it didn't stop there. In New York City, a small group of regime supporters gathered in Washington Square Park to hold a vigil honoring Khamenei. The gathering included a makeshift memorial with his photos and candles, and at least one speaker who praised his life and urged supporters to emulate him. Some of the participants at this same event even chanted "Death to America" and "Death to Israel." but I guess that's no surprise for that crowd. The good news is that in many of these cases, the events were massively outnumbered by Iranians who showed up to confront them, turning the ugly moment into a reminder that the Islamic Republic's propaganda does not speak for the Iranian people. But the fact that these vigils happened at all tells you something important. The Islamic Republic doesn't just export missiles and militias, it exports propaganda. And speaking of those courageous Iranians who showed up, our good story this week we end with today is exactly that. Because while a small group of regime supporters attempted to hold a mourning event for Ali Khamenei in London, they were quickly met by something they didn't expect. Iranians who were there to celebrate. Video from the scene showed members of the Iranian diaspora arriving at the gathering and completely overtaking it. What was supposed to be a somber memorial for the supreme leader of the Islamic regime quickly turned into something very, very different. Music started playing, people began chanting, some people were dancing in the street, and Iranian flags appeared everywhere, along with a few Israeli flags too. Take a look. So basically what the regime supporters had hoped would be a moment of grief ultimately became a street party. And we saw something really similar this week here in Israel. In the middle of a war, with sirens sounding and missiles being fired, Israelis running into bomb shelters during Purim, a celebration. And what did Israelis do? What they do best. They turned the bomb shelter into a rave. People were dancing, singing, celebrating Purim underground while the sirens were still blaring. Check it out. When you put those two moments side by side, Iranians turning a regime memorial into a street party and Israelis turning a bomb shelter and a missile attack into a rave, you start to see something important. These are two societies that refuse to live in fear. The Islamic Republic built its entire system on intimidation, violence, and control. But the more it tries to terrify people, the more people find ways to laugh at it. And in the end, that may be the most powerful form of resistance there is. Well, that's it for this week. Of course, back next week with more stories and updates from across the region and updates about the war against the Islamic Republic. If you have a story, feel free to reach out on social media at Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv on Instagram. Until then, I'll see you next week on Axis of Truth on JNS.
At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with a welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kol El Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kol El Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help. And you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kol El Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Ladar Lazi, coming to you live from Israel with all the latest headlines from across the region. It's day 16 of Operation Roaring Lion, the war with Iran, and these are the latest developments. Israel came under fresh missile and rocket fire overnight and this morning, with launches from both Iran and Lebanon. Sirens sounded across central Israel several times during the night after ballistic missiles were fired from Iran. The Israel Defense Forces say most of the missiles were intercepted while others landed in open areas. In Holon, interception fragments sparked a fire and caused minor damage. Paramedics from Magen David Adom treated 2 elderly people at the scene and several others were treated for anxiety. Additional alerts were triggered early this morning after projectiles were launched toward southern Israel, while a rocket fired from Lebanon was also intercepted by air defenses. Over the weekend, Israel remained under intermittent missile and rocket fire from Iran and Hezbollah as the war enters its third week. In the south, an Iranian missile struck near Eilat, injuring a 12-year-old boy, now listed in moderate condition, while 2 other people were lightly hurt. At the same time, Hezbollah fired heavy rocket barrages from Lebanon. Meanwhile, the Israel Defense Forces say its air campaign inside Iran is intensifying, with more than 200 targets struck in the past day alone. The military says Israeli Air Force jets hit dozens of ballistic missile launchers, including some that were armed and ready to fire towards Israel. Additional targets included air defense systems, missile launch sites, and weapons storage facilities. The IDF says many of the strikes were focused specifically on Iranian missile launchers in an effort to reduce the scale of attacks on Israeli territory. Israeli aircraft also targeted a facility linked to the intelligence branch of Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, which collects and analyzes intelligence for the Iranian regime. The military says the site was struck while several senior intelligence officials were present, though damage assessments are still underway. And over the weekend, Defense Minister Israel Katz addressed the ongoing campaign. Let's hear what he had to say.
גם חיל האוויר הישראלי ממשיך בגל תקיפות עוצמתי בטהרן ובכל איראן. איראן מפעילה טרור וסחטנות אזורית ועולמית כדי להרתיע את ישראל וארצות הברית מלהמשיך במערכה, ונענית בעוצמת פלדה חזקה ובלתי מתפשרת. אנחנו נכנסים לישורת ההכרעה במאבק בניסיונות המשטר לשרוד, תוך גרימת סבל הולך וגובר לעם האיראני לבין כניעה. רק העם האיראני יכול לשים לזה סוף במאבק נחוש עד להפלת משטר הטרור והצלת איראן.
And the United States is also escalating its military campaign against Iran, striking targets on Hag Island.
The signs are clearly there. The economy is in a collapsing situation. They are, in terms of their ability to fight, there's no Navy, there's no Air Force, even their ability to launch rockets in Israel and other Gulf states is diminished. So in that respect, it's clearly towards the end of the Islamic Republic.
Hello and welcome to the ILTV podcast. I'm Mayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV, and we are so happy to welcome back our viewers and our listeners. Now, of course, we are in the middle of a war with Iran, the U.S. and Israel against Iran, and so we've brought in an expert, author Einat Wilf, the chair of the Oz Party, the writer of the book Peace Not Now, and a strategic commentator about the region. Welcome, Einat.
Thank you.
So, and for 2 weeks already, Israel and the United States have been striking inside Iran. Do you believe that we are watching what will really be the beginning of the end of this Iranian regime, or is this going to be a very long and dangerous war with perhaps not that outcome?
So the short answer is yes. The Islamic Republic is clearly on its last legs. You are right that it might take time, but even before the most recent wave of kind of fighting, someone who's actually more identified with the Islamic Republic wrote a few months ago upon visiting Iran that the feel, he described it as a late Soviet feel. So The signs are clearly there. The economy is in a collapsing situation. They are, in terms of their ability to fight, there's no Navy, there's no Air Force, even their ability to launch rockets in Israel and other Gulf states is diminished. So in that respect, it's clearly towards the end of the Islamic Republic. For me, the thing that even long before October 7th led me to believe and to even be very bullish on the end of the Islamic Republic is that I looked at it from a historical perspective. I looked at all the regimes, the countries that chose to be the main sponsors of what I've come to call Palestinianism, this ideology that prioritizes the destruction of the Jewish state. And if you look at the greatest supporters, collaborators of Palestinianism for the last century, they've been the Nazis, the Pan-Arabists, the Soviets, the Ayatollahs, the Islamic Republic. And you can see a pattern here. They all lost in cold or hot wars, and their ideology ended up being in the dustbin of history. And the Islamic Republic is going to be no exception. So yes, it is a regime on its last legs. It's behaving in that way, shooting literally in every direction, that it might be extended, that it's doing everything to last a bit longer. It might. But it is the end.
So if it is the end, then would you say, in your estimation, that we are winning this war?
Until the Islamic Republic falls. I mean, I think the greatest concern I have is that there will be a moment of saying, okay, we're stopping this, we're negotiating. So I'm not discounting what I find a terrible possibility, that there will be pressure to give the Islamic Republic a bit more air to breathe. And I certainly hope that no one will fall for that. So yes, I think the Islamic Republic is towards the end, but I think making it sooner rather than later should be the priority.
And in other words, there could be pressure against U.S. President Donald Trump to maybe stop fighting and give them another chance to get back to the negotiating table, despite what we heard from Witkoff and Kushner, that they came to the table saying, we're moving forward with our nuclear weapons.
Exactly. And in that sense, there's no use for negotiations, because where the Islamic Republic is and where the United States is doesn't meet. I mean, there's nothing that can be negotiated that would meet between the two. So it only would be in order to get some breathing space, maybe to get Russian support, maybe to get Chinese support, maybe to revenge at kind of those who might try to bring down the Islamic Republic from within Iran. Which is why you don't want to give them that breathing space.
Makes sense. Now, for decades, Iran has really projected its power across the area through its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, lately, in late recent years, the Houthis. Do you think that with the fall of this regime, then we're also going to see the fall of that proxy system?
Certainly. And in that respect, I think the fall of the Islamic Republic should be thought of on par with the fall of the Soviet Union. Because the Islamic Republic, like the Soviet Union, was never just a country or a place. It was always an ideology that claims to have universal jurisdiction, that claims to be relevant everywhere, and also has universal ambitions. There is a great piece that just came out in the Free Press by Jonathan Rosen about the world that the fatwa makes, talking about the fatwa against Salman Rushdie and showing how that was also the Islamic Republic, because you see a lot of the criticisms are like, this is an attack on a sovereign state. The Islamic Republic is not a normal sovereign state that is like happy to be limited to its borders. It has universal ideological ambitions, and the fatwa against Salman Rushdie was about a world without borders, where a fatwa actually compels Muslims who choose to listen to it everywhere to violence. So in that respect, we need to think of it as an ideological battle. And we see it also on the attacks on the UAE. There's a reason that the UAE has been attacked more than Israel. And because the UAE represents the ideological mirror of the Islamic Republic. It represents what Islam could be when it seeks to be future-looking, moderate, inclusive, focused more on building for its own people than destroying what other people, especially the Jews, have built. So it's no coincidence that these are the people that are being attacked. And the Islamic Republic needs to be thought of as an ideology. And therefore, when the ideology falls, like the Soviet Union, a lot of the systems that it created to support it, like the proxies that you mentioned, also begin to fall, because the Islamic Republic, it wasn't just ideological kinship. It was money. It was military support. It was training. It was legitimacy. When all of that is taken away, when you can isolate Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we see that already happening, when you force the choice, are you Lebanese fighting for Lebanese interests, or are you fighting for Iranian interests? And what's happening in Lebanon is fascinating. Because Hezbollah was forced by the Islamic Republic to attack Israel and thereby show its hand that it's not fighting for Lebanon, right? It promised the Lebanese factions that it's a Lebanese organization for Lebanese interests, and then it showed its hand as an Iranian foreign presence. And now this is why you see so many Lebanese factions remarkably united against Hezbollah. So the more you expose the proxies as basically Iranian forces rather than local ones, the easier you make it to isolate them and ultimately to defeat them.
And certainly we could hope to see that with Hamas then as well in Gaza, which could really lead to a very different reality on our borders. Now, right in the recent, couple of weeks, our attacks have been predominantly airstrikes against Iran. We've seen the U.S. strike as well, in the naval ships, etc., but it's been basically missile strikes against targeted precision strikes. Trump was asked about putting boots on the ground, and he didn't say no. If boots were to be on the ground in Iran, what would that look like? Why would we need to put boots on the ground? Is that essential for this regime change that you say is going to come about?
My guess is that to the extent that there is any such thought, it would be special operations to remove, for example, the enriched uranium or something of the sort, not a kind of massive military invasion, more of a Venezuela extraction situation, either of people, but I think mostly of the enriched uranium. But beyond that, the real boots on the ground will be the Iranian people themselves. There has been an effort to create the notion that Israel dragged the United States into this war. And what I've been saying is that if anyone dragged the United States into this war, and that I'm saying it is a good thing, it's the Iranian people themselves. Because by coming out to the streets remarkably courageously and trying to bring down the Islamic Republic, what they demonstrated to the United States is that if the United States were to provide the envelope to bring down the power of the Islamic Republic, to kind of weaken its ability to kind of go against the people of Iran, then the people of Iran can take back their country. And I think ultimately that is the idea and that's the vision. When they came out to the streets, what they showed is that if America will do its part in bringing down kind of the power of the Islamic Republic, it is the Iranian people on the ground who will take back their country.
So let's talk then about Reza Pahlavi, who's not in the country right now, obviously.
Yes.
And, he's apparently going to be potentially this future leader. Trump definitely wants him to be the future leader, and he said he's willing to step up to the plate. Do you think that's realistic, considering he's not actually there during all of this?
I think he is only interesting and valuable, and he says so himself, as a transitional figure and maybe under a kind of constitutional monarchy. Because I know, especially in the West, you see it in Britain, but also in America, there's this trauma of Afghanistan, Iraq. No, we don't want this forever nation-building, democracy-exporting war. But the problem is, just as there was no understanding of what Iraq and Afghanistan are, there seems to be, again, on the flip side, no understanding of what Iran is. Iran is a much more coherent, historical, national, kind of civilizational entity. It has a clear sense of collective self and history. Iran is as close as you come in textbooks to having the elements for successful democratic transition. A highly educated population, a strained but substantial middle class, no youth bulge. The way that the population skews older. They have, even within the Islamic Republic, even though those are very, very limited candidates, they have the experience of parliaments, of democracy. They actually have everything that can move, or elections, not democracy, that will move to successful, secular, pro-Western democracy. So it can be under a constitutional monarchy. These are the many democracies in Europe. And Reza Pahlavi can serve that symbolic role. But ultimately, it has to be the people of Iran. This is what will make it most successful, ongoing. They now chose the son of Khamenei. And I commented that if you look at the Middle East and places that do not have a monarchical dynastic tradition, whether it was in Libya with Gaddafi, in Egypt with Mubarak, in Syria with Assad, in Iraq with Saddam Hussein, whenever they tried to put in place their sons or to groom them to take over, this did not end well. Not for the fathers, not for the sons, not for the country. So for me, this shows again the Islamic Republic being on its last legs, another indication. And for the Iranian people, you don't want to have another strong man or another failed effort at a dynasty. You do want to have a democratic transition, because Iran, and I've said it for many years, is the one place in the Middle East that can actually succeed in that.
It'd be incredible, but obviously to get there, there's going to be a lot of work. I mean, how long are we talking from when, let's say, the U.S. and Israel say, okay, we've accomplished our goals, people go out to the street and take over your country, to when we could even see this regime change? And will there be a lot of bloodshed like we saw in January when they try?
This all depends on whether the United States and Israel will succeed in really peeling off all the elements of the coercion of the Islamic Republic. And we see that there were a lot of the targets were these coercive elements, headquarters of the Basij, of the Revolutionary Guards. So the more that gets peeled off, the more that it becomes clear that the Islamic Republic no longer has domestic coercive abilities, then you're actually talking about the possibilities of a very rapid transition. Because again, the Iranian people didn't just go to the streets recently. They've been going to the streets for years. And in many times until the American president, I think, correctly responded to the Iranian people being in the streets. For the first time, America is not betraying them. Even President Obama said that his greatest, and I think it's true, foreign policy mistake, he had others, but this is clearly his greatest, was after inspiring the people of Iran to go to the streets with his speech in Cairo, he betrayed them. And finally, America is not betraying the people of Iran, which means that it will have to go all the way in making sure that the Islamic Republic doesn't have coercive abilities. And once that's clear, the transition can actually be very quick. But it really depends on making sure that whatever coercive elements the Islamic Republic has, they're minimal.
So that could maybe mean the boots on the ground could not only be to take out the enriched uranium, but perhaps to stand and own the TV station and make sure that the government's not allowed, the regime is not allowed to use it, to maybe be in some of those government buildings that they're targeting and ensure that they have no place to roll. Would that make sense, that maybe they might kind of take over strongholds while the people take over?
Maybe. I certainly hope that you can do these things these days with a combination of airstrike and electronic kind of warfare.
AI, yeah.
Yes, exactly. But yes, I mean, to the extent that there's any thinking of boots on the ground, my guess is that it's incredibly limited to kind of high stakes symbols.
Okay. Now, you know, it's interesting over the last few days, as you mentioned, because the IDF, and they've reported incredible numbers in terms of both taking down air defense systems, but also eradicating the missile launchers, you know, the ballistic missile launchers. I think we were at like 70% the other day. And so, but we're seeing a lot of rockets come in the north. The Galilee seems to be constantly under barrage by Hezbollah that we mentioned, fighting in concert with Iran. And it's interesting to me because I felt like we had signed a ceasefire in November 2025. We knew that Hezbollah still had some weapons. Lebanon committed to trying to get them out of their hands. We knew they weren't able to do it. But we had killed the majority of the Hezbollah leadership. We had done what seemed like a very good job with Hezbollah, but yet Hezbollah seems pretty strong right now. How is it possible that so many rockets are coming from Lebanon with all the work we did over the last 2.5 years?
Because, again, like with Iran, if you don't lead ultimately to, in every place it's different, but the ideology has to be defeated. Lebanon, the big mistake, and at the time I said it, was to agree to a ceasefire mechanism with Lebanon and with Hezbollah, because we know from experience, ceasefires are only for the sides to rearm. Because the only way that it ends is if really the ideology that brought it ends. So this time it has to be that the Islamic Republic falls and that Lebanon as a country reasserts its sovereignty after so many decades of suffering. And this is why it's so important that it was clear now that Hezbollah acted not in the interest of the people of Lebanon, but in the interest of Iran as a foreign power. And I think what the state of Israel needs to say right now is that they are willing at any point to enter direct negotiations with Lebanon, and we hear some voices from Lebanon saying that, direct negotiations for full normalization that will pass in parliament by all the factions. Because we can't afford to have one more Lebanese leader signing an agreement, being assassinated. A way of asserting Lebanese sovereignty is for the parliament of Lebanon to pass a unanimous, or at least barring Hezbollah, a unanimous kind of agreement and resolution by all the factions in parliament to normalize with Israel. This is how you isolate the extreme elements, and if you bring down the Islamic Republic, then you really bring an end to it. Anything that is ceasefire-y, anything that is, as we call it in Israel, sevev, like another round, it is just an endless loop. And I think the people of Israel are saying to themselves, I think correctly, we're willing to suffer, we're willing to sacrifice, we'll run back and forth like zombies to the shelter, but we need to know that this is not another round, that this brings down the Islamic Republic, and this brings Lebanon to finally behave like a sovereign country.
So let's go to the other border for a minute.
Yes.
Because Hamas has been really quiet. And you just mentioned, ceasefire, rearming. Why are we not hearing from Hamas? Is this a time for them to rearm? And are we going to now have an issue with Hamas when all is said and done with Iran?
We already have an issue with Hamas, and also there we made a mistake, my argument from the beginning, by making it a war to disarm Hamas. I would argue that this is a ridiculous goal because Hamas is not some alien force that took over, the people of Gaza against their will. Hamas is the executive arm of the ideology that I've come to call Palestinianism. They executed, they planned the October 7th invasion and massacre in the name of that ideology. They were hailed in the name of that ideology. So the issue is not just to disarm them. And the reason, by the way, why they're quiet is that they're already planning ahead to pretend to be the police force of New Gaza and hold to their arms this way. They have to be disbanded from their ideological arms. What does it mean? It has to be clear that no one in Gaza, 1.5 million people in Gaza, are bizarrely and falsely registered as Palestine refugees. They are not, by any stretch of the imagination, Palestine refugees. They were born in Gaza. They live in Gaza. This is it. They need to be removed from the UNRWA registered as Palestine refugees. Their refugee cards need to be handed over to be exchanged for resident of Gaza cards. It has to be made clear that nothing will get built in Gaza until they are removed from the list. They hand over those cards and they understand and sign and declare that there is no such thing as a right of return. We need to understand that all around the Middle East, it's ideological warfare. All the metals, all the rockets, all the arms, all the tunnels were built in the name of a terrible ideology that prioritizes destroying the Jewish state over building for the people of Iran, of Lebanon, and of Gaza. That ideology, like the ideology of Nazi Germany, of imperial racial supremacy in Japan, has to go away so that the people can finally build for themselves. So yes, the fact that Hamas right now is quiet, they're strategically quiet, but we need to not be fooled by it.
Well, and yet there's another country. I mean, there's just so many proxies. We can just go around the globe. So let's go to Yemen, right, where the Houthis sit. And, we didn't really ever finish with the Houthis, and we knew that. And it's strikingly silent from Yemen right now. We haven't seen any Houthi attacks since this escalated with Iran. Do you expect that we will at some point see the Houthis join this war as well?
Tough to say. If they haven't acted by now, not clear when and how they'll do it. I'm sure there is pressure by the Islamic Republic for them to also contribute their share. But they're looking at Hezbollah. And they're also looking at the Islamic Republic itself. And they're saying the price that is to pay for kind of operating as a proxy. And remember, this is not just Israel now. The American military is now in the region with all its might. So I'm sure they're making those calculations.
It's fascinating. Now, in terms of the strikes, continuing, we know that Witkoff said that they could have had enough enriched uranium to potentially make 11 nuclear bombs. We talk about we've been bombing the ballistic missiles, the nuclear sites. The U.S. has gone in already a couple of times. Maybe some of that nuclear, capability is already eradicated. But if pushed to the very limit here, like they know they're about to fall, do you envision that they actually might enrich that and use it before this war is over? And if so, what could that look like?
So clearly there are calculations, and this is, again, the reason why this has to end with the fall of the Islamic Republic. Because basically what they've shown in the last few days is what the Islamic Republic does when it's desperate. Mm-hmm. It shoots in every direction. It endangers the Gulf states. The Gulf states for years thought that they kind of play this, fudge the issues, play this middle ground between Iran, between the United States, enjoy the best of both worlds. But now the Islamic Republic is showing what it does when it's desperate. Again, even pushing Hezbollah to operate was a desperate move. So I think with the understanding what desperation looks like, it, I think, creates the greater resolve, certainly among the Americans and certainly in Israel, that this has to end with the fall of the Islamic Republic. Because like he said, anything that lets them live under the idea that they're desperate and therefore they'll take desperate moves is nothing that can be afforded and allowed. And therefore, this can only end with the fall of the Islamic Republic. And every day that passes that they become more desperate is another day that shows that they have to go.
So we are wrapping up, but I need a final sentiment, a sentence or two about Netanyahu. Do you feel that the prime minister has done this war well? Do you think that we're coming out of this different politically than we were when we went into it?
Remains to be seen. So far, Netanyahu has allowed a ceasefire in place in Gaza, a ceasefire in place in Lebanon. And that's what we'll need to see. I think anything that ends short of the fall of the Islamic Republic will not be considered, and I think rightfully so, as having conducted the war well.
Understood. So Einat Wilf, Dr. Einat Wilf, author and the founder of the Oz Party, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
As Operation Roaring Lion continues and security tensions escalate, one organization is already shifting into high gear to make sure Israel's most vulnerable do not go hungry. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has more.
As Israel confronts the challenges of Operation Roaring Lion, Lekit Israel, the National Food Bank, has moved into full emergency mode. The organization is expanding its relief efforts nationwide, working to ensure that food continues to reach those who need it most, even as security conditions complicate daily life. In the coming days, Lekit will distribute thousands of hot meals to Holocaust survivors living in housing complexes across the country. Around 1,700 nutritious meals are expected to be delivered each day, part of a broader purchase of approximately 12,000 meals designed to guarantee a steady and reliable supply during this period of uncertainty. At the same time, the organization is rolling out digital food vouchers to hundreds of families through its nonprofit partner agencies, with plans to expand that program in the days ahead. The goal is to provide immediate, dignified assistance that families can access safely and independently. Despite restrictions and ongoing security concerns, Lekit continues to rescue surplus agricultural produce and prepared food from packing houses and other sources across Israel. The food is transported to the organization's logistics center and then distributed to partner agencies operating under Homefront Command guidelines. This shift is not new territory for Lekit. Throughout the last 2.5 years of war, the organization has rescued and redistributed surplus food on a large scale. During emergency, demand rises sharply. Even under fire, Lekit says it is committed to maintaining continuity, protecting its staff and volunteers, and expanding its response so that Israel's most vulnerable populations are not left behind in a time of crisis.
How do you take out the entire leadership of the Islamic Republic, blind their Russian-made radars, and hit 200 targets at the exact same second, all whilst the world is watching and waiting for you to do it? The answer is a mission so sophisticated, it's almost impossible to comprehend. And it started this Saturday morning when Israelis were sleeping in and a siren rudely awakens them from their beds. On the phone, the alert says the attack against Iran has officially started. A state of emergency is now being declared across the whole country. Make sure to stay near your bomb shelters. It surprised Israelis, which is funny, as we had all been living in the anticipation of this attack. But none of us thought it could happen during the light of day. Who expects a war to start in the morning? Well, not Iran, that's for sure. And this was the first manipulation tactic used by the IDF and the US military, and boy oh boy, was it a success. The entire world was watching in anticipation of this war, and yet still, somehow, they managed to pull the element of surprise out of the bag. The insane amount of prep and thought that went into this mission cannot be underestimated, and today we'll be breaking it all down. How they planned it, how it all happened, and what's going to go on next. Welcome to the Meira K Show on JNS TV. Let's dive right in. This operation was conducted on February 28, 2026, and it was a massive joint mission codenamed Operation Epic Fury by the US and Operation Roaring Lion by Israel. It's a multi-phase strategy to dismantle the Iranian military from the inside out, and it's just mad. Here is the step-by-step breakdown of how the operation unfolded. Step 1. Before any missiles were even launched, the US and Israel attacked Iran's radar system to dismantle their defense. Iran has amazing air defense systems from Russia and China, and to succeed in the mission, the IDF needed them to not work. Well, how are they going to do this? To begin with, they injected false data into Iranian radar systems. Instead of seeing the real planes, Iranian operators saw ghost fleets on their screens. This created total confusion. By the time they had realized their screens were lying to them, the first wave of real missiles were already seconds away from impact. Which brings us to step 2. Confusing the radar technicians is important, but it doesn't dismantle them for the long term. There is also an additional problem that the US doesn't know exactly where they all are to target them. So they hacked up a genius plan to finish off the air defenses. The US launched hundreds of drone decoys. What are they? Well, these are tiny drones that are programmed to look exactly like giant F-15 fighter jets on the radar systems. The Iranian defenders panicked when they saw this swarm of giant planes and fired their expensive surface-to-air missiles at these ghosts. Not only did that dwindle their supply, this revealed the exact location of every Iranian radar and missile battery, which the US and Israel then promptly destroyed. I mean, it's genius. But this was just the beginning, because the most impressive part of the logistics was what is actually known as time on target, which was step 3. To effectively take out the targets, they needed incredible levels of coordination to ensure the attacks all happened at the exact same time. The US and Israel coordinated strikes from thousands of miles apart. Ships in the Mediterranean, carriers in the Arabian Sea, US bases across the Gulf countries, and of course, jets from Israel. They all needed to act in perfect coordination, and the math of this is incomprehensible. They calculated the travel time of every single weapon so that hundreds of missiles and bombs hit their targets at the exact same second. Over 200 aircrafts, perfectly timed. The result speaks for itself. This caused systematic shock. The entire military command of Iran essentially crashed because they were being hit in every major city like Tehran and Isfahan simultaneously. And for step 4, we have the strikes themselves, with America and Israel working in tandem for maximum impact. There were a few goals for this preemptive strike to ensure the Islamic Republic was sent into disarray before it started. The leadership, air defense, and firing abilities were the main targets of this first wave of attacks. And with each country having different military abilities, they divided and conquered. The US focused on the military bases and factories, but Israel's primary mission was Operation Genesis, targeting the leadership. They focused on the district in Tehran where the government lives. The reason that Saturday was chosen for the beginning of the war was due to the intelligence Israel had collected that the heads of the Islamic regime would be gathering for meetings to discuss their plans, and this included Khamenei. Although this hasn't been 100% clarified, it sounds that a big part of the reason for the diplomatic discussions between the US and Iran was to create access to intel about the leadership, so they could target them if the time came. And boy oh boy, how it came. You already know how successful it was. The Supreme Leader's compound was completely destroyed, and him and other family members were successfully taken out, as was the defense minister and over 40 of the army's top regime generals. It couldn't have been more successful. Khamenei is now gone, and as of this moment, we are hearing reports that his planned successors have also been eliminated. According to the IDF, all senior terrorist leaders of Iran's axis of terror have been eliminated. I repeat, all of them have been eliminated. Think of the shock to the Islamic regime. In a matter of minutes, almost the entire chain of command is wiped out, which leads to chaos and inability to effectively act. But even with that being the case, the Islamic Republic have launched an incredible counterattack. But we will get to that in a second. The US, meanwhile, is taking out more and more nuclear abilities, looking for launchers and factories that build Iran's ballistic abilities. They are also focused on taking out instrumental government facilities and buildings, marking an act of resistance and strengthening the Iranian people's resolve to fight back. To do so, they are using the most sophisticated military equipment known to man, like the B-2 stealth bombers, to drop massive bunker buster bombs on underground nuclear sites that regular missiles couldn't reach. And which brings us to step number 5, because another big issue arises now. With all of these fighter jets and stealth aircrafts, the amount of fuel needed is astronomical. The flight from Israel to Iran is over 1,000 miles, let alone from the US, and the jets need to refuel. Here comes the crazy solution. Huge tanker planes waiting in secret corridors over neighboring countries. The fighter jets would hook up to these tankers in midair, refill their tanks while flying, and then continue the mission. This allowed them to stay over Iran for hours to hunt down mobile missile launches. Israel and the US now basically have complete control of the airspace. For context, during the 12-day war, we had 4. Now we have over 50 in the skies. For the first 2 to 3 days of this war, the US and Israel are smashing the Islamic Republic. The missions have been almost a complete success, with only 1 or 2 fighter jets shot down by friendly fire in Kuwait. But according to reports, the pilots are alive and only lightly injured. With all that being said, however, Iran is not going down without a fight, and they are giving it their all. In other conflicts with them in the past, they have taken their time to retaliate. This is due to diplomatic reasons and psychological warfare. Keeping Israelis on their toes and afraid is absolutely a win for the Islamic Republic, but not this time around. Within hours, they had launched massive barrages of missiles at Israel, but not only Israel. And this is where it starts to get interesting, because this was unexpected. They launched drones and missiles at 8 other countries as well, leading to an all-out war in the Middle East. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, because Iran's plan of retaliation is actually extremely sophisticated and held many different prongs to it, all of which we'll break down now. To begin with, they had activated a decentralized defense, meaning commanders now have full autonomy of decision-making. They had planned that this might happen. With the Diaspora Operations not far off their minds, they knew that the leadership would be the first to be targeted. And so they had set up their response team to be able to handle not having a center of command. Because Iran is so big and the regime knows that they are prone to revolutions, they have built out a very extensive web systems of military responses across Iran designed to shut down uprisings quickly. This system is proving to be very effective for activity when there isn't access to the top brass decision makers. It is these fighters that are currently shooting at anybody celebrating Khamenei's death, but also manning the firing abilities at other countries. Now, whilst everybody anticipated attacks on Israel, they weren't expecting the Gulf countries to be hit with such an intense level of war. In numbers, just to understand, within the first 2 days, Bahrain had been hit with over 45 ballistic missiles and drones, Jordan, 13 missiles and over 30 drones, Kuwait, tens of missiles, Qatar, over 60 missiles, and the UAE had over 137 missiles and over 200 drones attack their civilian areas. These are enormous numbers. That's over 730 projectiles not aimed at Israel, which has also had hundreds of missiles ourselves. The regime had promised to attack the US bases operating from other Arab countries, and whilst many of them were evacuated, but not all, especially those that were needed for this operation, they didn't expect Iran to just attack the countries as a whole. Because the Islamic Republic has been focusing on civilian and tourist areas, especially in the UAE. Let's explain this for a second. We're used to thinking of Iran as the enemy of the West, which we now know they very, very much are. But within their religion, it's actually a bit more complex than that. We, the West, are infidels. But what about Muslims that support the West or act according to the West? What are they? They are deemed traitors, and the Islamic Republic hates them almost as much as us, if not more. But there is another level to this. Remember when there was supposed to be an attack on Iran a few months back, and we had reported that it was the Gulf countries, Saudi and Qatar, that had pushed for the attack to be stopped? The reason being that they didn't want their tourism reputation to be destroyed. They had been promising themselves as a country that is the safest place in the world, and a war in the Middle East would destroy the reputation that they had been working for years to build. They were hoping to stop an attack on Iran to make sure that they didn't end up as collateral damage, and they put a lot of pressure on America to make that happen. Iran understand this, and they have been hoping that similar pressure would be put on the West this time around if these countries had enough reason to get the West to stop their attacks on Iran. Simply put, Iran is firing at these Gulf countries for 3 reasons. First, to target the US bases. Second, as an Islamic punishment for acting as traitors. But third, as hopeful insurance policy to try and get these countries to put pressure on the US to stop the attacks. They know that firing at Israel does nothing to the international demographic, and nobody cares anymore due to years of their marketing strategies. But Dubai is a different story. This, however, has backfired on them because the damage has already been done. You've all seen the videos of Dubai on fire, and now the Gulf countries have decided that enough is enough. Yes, they were hoping to keep Iran quiet, but seeing as that didn't happen, they need to get rid of their maniacal cousin. Now that Iran has already attacked, the best way forward is to say to the world, look, we actually are safe. We got rid of this Iranian threat, those crazy people. It was a fluke in the system. It's not a symptom of the Middle East. The IRGC is gone. Tourism can now come back. This is the reason you are seeing Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE pushing for the US to finish the job and even planning their own retaliations. Iran has ostracized itself, and very, very badly. Look, they were never going to go down without a fight, that's for sure. But what about their original contingency plan? You know, the ring of fire they had created. Well, up until yesterday, it had been surprisingly quiet. Hezbollah, their superpower in the region, had not yet joined in. Yes, they issued a letter condemning Israel's attack, but not more than that. Seems like Iran did not appreciate that though, and after 48 hours, Hezbollah has joined into this war by firing drones at Israel. Let me be very clear. Israel, in response, has now issued an all-out war back at Hezbollah, and at this very moment is trying to eliminate senior Hezbollah operatives. But even with Hezbollah trying to fire drones and missiles at us, this is literally nothing in comparison to what they were built out to do. I mean, do you remember 2 years ago what their firing abilities were like and where they are at now? It's incomprehensible. And Israel is right back in Lebanon, taking out the leadership and attacking Hezbollah again and again. It's now officially a declaration of war against them, and the Lebanese are fleeing en masse. Israel has made it clear that no one in the Hezbollah leadership is safe, and I think by now it's safe to say that they believe us. This, too, will be a complicated front and something that Israelis are preparing for. We are praying for our soldiers who are on the ground fighting this war. It's a different beast to Iran, where most of it is from the air using the Air Force. This is combat, and the dangers of that are significant. But it's not just the air and ground wars that are being fought. Remember the Houthis? Who remembers them? As we have had nada from them, literal silence. But that doesn't mean war isn't raging in the seas. It very much is. Yes, Iran is targeting ships and claiming to fire missiles, but as of now, they have succeeded in burning only one of their own tankers, and the US has announced that they have fired down an Iranian ship. Iran are trying to take down the enormous American tankers that are surrounding them and are acting as launching pads for the jets and are claiming that they're firing ballistic missiles at them, but as of now, it's not working for them. But still, don't worry. Besides attacking Israel and the Gulf countries and using their proxies, they still have more options to fight back, such as shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, which supplies the oil flow to most of the world. Well, that is something that they are trying to do right now, because it impacts many countries that they are hoping will put diplomatic pressure on Israel to stop the attacks. I mean, one of those countries is India, who's massively impacted by this, as is China, which sends 40% of their oil through there. Saudi Arabia, by the way, sends 80% of their oil through the strait, and the point of shutting down the strait would once again be to send the economy spiraling and increase the pressure on the US and Israel to stop the war, especially as Russia, acting as an alternate route for oil of the strait, would potentially make a lot of money, something that many countries aren't interested in if all the oil has to go through them. This is part of why the Saudis are now threatening to actually do something. And as of this moment, Iran is attacking the Saudis' oil supplies. That is a direct assault on Saudi Arabia. The Islamic Republic has honestly lost their mind. This is really one of their last options. And it is not clear just now how the US and Israel plan on dealing with this economic shakedown. But it's safe to assume that if we know that this would be an issue, so did they, and that they had something up their sleeve. Of course, in addition, Iran also have their online campaign strategies, lying through their teeth about killing Israeli senior army officials, as if, and that the US attacked a school, killing 50 little girls. Also, of course, this is all propaganda. It was actually a failed launch on their behalf that killed those girls, but this is what they thrive off and what the Western media is, of course, licking up and helping them to do. I mean, the New York Times described Khamenei, or maybe it was the Washington Post, as a man with a white bushy beard and a nice smile. That crazy dictator? What is wrong with the West? But that's why you come to JNS TV, because we actually report the truth and not these biased lies that the media makes up to defend terrorism. So, that brings us to our final question. Is the Islamic Republic almost finished? Not quite yet. They are kicking up a fight, and according to most intelligence, they are only using the lightest ballistic missiles first, hoping to build up an intensity because maybe Israel will lose its ability to defend. They might run out of ammunition and defense against missiles, and then they could really attack us with a proper ballistics. This war is very much ongoing, and it's not going to end in the next few days, and it's safe to assume that it might get worse. But it also can't drag out too long either. Because with the level of intensity of the US and Israel's attacks, sooner rather than later, the Islamic Republic will be completely dismantled. Israel, unfortunately, has already seen over 10 casualties from the missiles, and whilst we have now activated our laser beam systems and we are at peak capacity shooting down the barrages, which are happening basically all day, it is still very much a war. Celebrations in schools are cancelled and the country is in a state of semi-lockdown. But still, there is a feeling of excitement in the air because this might be it. The existential threat we have lived with for the last 47 years might be coming to an end. Celebrations of the death of Khamenei were widespread and the wins for Israel are many. Yes, the Islamic Republic have a new guy coming to replace him, but the feeling in Israel is why even learn his name? How long do you think he's really going to last? Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. The world is also looking to the people of Iran. In both Trump and Netanyahu's statements, they made it clear that they are not looking to replace the regime. That is upon the Iranian people. They are just looking to disable them enough so that the Iranians can respond, and respond they are. We are right in the thick of it all, and we are praying for all those who have lost their lives for a better world. The US servicemen, the Israeli civilians, the Iranian people, all of the brave fighters who have put their lives on the line for this cause. May we know no more pain or harm, and may our enemies be obliterated forever. Yes, it's a scary time, but don't forget, this is Operation True Promise number 4, because their true promise of the Islamic Republic, first time, second time, and third time, completely failed. And I'm willing to bet that the fourth time is not going to be any better than that. I'm Ira Kay, and I will see you next time.
Ari, thank you so much for being here. Please tell me, what are you doing here?
Well, thank you for having me. We're here to celebrate Israel and America and to be part of this great community.
Amazing. So please tell me a little bit about Yeshiva University. What do you do?
We are the flagship Jewish university. We have thousands of students. We are actively promoting Israel. We're the only university in the country that flies the Israeli flag 365 days a year.
Wow.
Singing Hatikva at every event.
Wow.
That is what Yeshiva University does.
And I want to talk with you, first of all, about the rise of anti-Semitism. How do you feel about it right now?
Well, I feel that we have an opportunity, and that if attention is being paid to Jews, we're going to show them what Jews stand for. And that are true values that are a blessing to the world. That's what Yeshiva University is for our students, our undergraduate, our graduate students. That's what we educate them. They go out and are blessings to the world.
And what are we going to do with Mamdani?
We are going to show them what we stand for.
You're not afraid?
We're not. We are not. You know, if there's anti-Zionists in the world that are promoting terrible lies about Israel, we need to stand for the truth. And I believe that if Yeshiva University is in New York City, there was not a moment than now that we were created. This is our moment. This is our time to stand up and fight for Israel and show what the Torah is about and what the Jewish people are about.
You're not afraid?
We are not. We are not
Your
afraid.
students?
No, thank God. They're doing really well.
Oh my God, it's absolutely amazing. Now, how was it after October 7th?
October 7th was an important rallying moment. You know, every student of Yeshiva University was deeply affected. I myself, my son, is now, he's fought over 300 days in Givati. Three of my sons are Bogrei Tzal. My daughter, Sheirut Lumi. We made Aliyah 17 years ago.
Wow.
I'm the first American-Israeli president of Yeshiva University, and this was obviously very personal and deeply real for all of us. And we responded. We've been praying and actively working for the hostages since the moment that it happened. I had the opportunity to deliver the benediction at President Trump's inauguration, where I was able to front and center praying for Israel and the return of the hostages. I'll tell you one brief moment. At that time, while everybody's head was down, I looked at the president, and the president and I looked at each other, and he nodded to me and signaled that he's got the hostages. I was the first speaker after him. It wasn't just from day one, it was from moment one. That the president knew that he was going to make sure the hostages were returned, and President Trump delivered.
Thank God we have President Trump.
I don't think there's a question about that for Israel, for the Jewish people fighting anti-Semitism, the President Trump has been such a positive force for us.
You gave an award to Elise Stefani.
Yes.
Can you please tell me about it a little bit?
Absolutely. Look, part of our mission is to gather the heroes. He said that the Jewish people, Yeshiva University, are blessings to the world. We want to find our partners. So for graduation, we have promoted those heroes in America that have stood for Israel and the Jewish people and true American values. So the year before, we had Senator John Fetterman, who was incredible,
He's amazing.
standing up, amazing. And last year,
Who's going to be next year?
We actually have a great.
I have a few names for you.
We have a great person for next year, but I can't announce it yet.
No, give us
I can't announce it yet. We have a great.
Can I guess? I have 3 names.
I don't know. I won't. But I'm curious what your names are. But I won't tell you. I won't tell you.
Okay. But don't smile.
Okay.
Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, and Tom Cotton. One of them?
Those are 3 good ones. I'm not going to say a word.
It's Lindsay. I saw
I'm not
it.
going to say it. Lindsay actually greeted me. I spoke at the Senate this year.
And
Lindsay spoke to introduce me and greeted me. He's he's a good man. But I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything. There's no comment.
maybe invite the president.
Listen, I have no comment right now. No, really.
I have a great scoop here.
I have no comment right now.
No, I'm joking.
But,
what is your
yes.
next goal?
We are building our graduate schools for excellence. So we've actually doubled in size from in our graduate students, which are not just Jewish students, but they come from all countries and all over the world. So they have an opportunity to study in a Zionist university. So let me tell you, we had a
Where
group,
can I sign in?
It's amazing. And they're enormously successful as professionals. So recently we had this group from South Korea. They came to Yeshiva, they wrote me a note, they said, "Dear President Berman, we love Yeshiva, we stand with Israel." That's what's happening. All these students from all countries and all cultures, they come and they see what a blessing the Jewish people are. We welcome them into our homes and our hearts, and that's what we're promoting. So we're continuing that, growing our graduate schools. We're just starting an engineering program, which is going to be amazing. We've opened up a new college of science and health. We've really been expanding enormously, and we're seeing great interest from students, from faculty, from donors. People want to support today the flagship Jewish university.
Okay, so usually I ask from people to send a message, mainly to the Jewish people.
Yeah.
But now I want to ask you, what message would you like to send? Maybe to Mamdani or President Trump. You can decide, but who do you want to send a
President
message?
Trump, it's thank you. To Mayor Mamdani, it's we will always stand for Israel and for the values that we hold dear. And he should know that we've been here for over 100 years in New York, and we are confident that we will continue to grow and expand and stand strong.
Do you understand Hebrew?
אני עליתי
So,
לפני 17
okay,
שנה,
so
אני בוגר של האוניברסיטה
I'll say
העברית.
the sentence of Tal Brody. You
Yes.
remember?
כן,
אנחנו כאן, ואנחנו על המפה, ואנחנו נישאר על המפה.
absolutely.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for this
Thank you for
interview.
having
Thank
me.
you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with a welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm India Naftali, coming to you live from Israel with all the biggest headlines from across the region. We are on day 17 of Operation Roaring Lion, and these are the latest developments. This morning, multiple impact sites were reported in central Israel after Iran likely used a cluster missile in the latest attack. One injury has so far been reported. Over the past 24 hours, Israel faced multiple rocket, missile and drone attacks from Iran and Iran-backed groups. Israeli officials say the rate of missile fire from Iran has declined since the start of the war, but attacks are expected to continue. With us now on the ground is ILTV's executive editor, Maayan Hoffman. Maayan, thank you for joining us. Maayan, what is the latest situation on the ground?
So unfortunately, India, from early this morning until late this afternoon, we've had just a constant barrage of missiles, including here in Jerusalem. Just a couple of hours ago, we had several impact sites in Jerusalem from a barrage of rockets coming from Iran. That is in addition to the constant barrage that the North is seeing. They have not let up Hezbollah rockets and drones. Now, here in Jerusalem, when we talk about impact sites, we're talking about 2 or 3 very strategic sites that were hit today. There was a direct impact of shrapnel, quite a large piece in eastern Jerusalem. We saw another piece of shrapnel, again, quite large in the Old City near the Temple Mount, as well as in the Jewish quarter. There was also some shrapnel that hit down near the Knesset and near the Prime Minister's office here in Jerusalem. Now, these are in these incidents, we didn't have too many injuries. People did take shelter, but we did see that in East Jerusalem, a 42-year-old man was taken to the hospital for minor injuries to his hand, injuries that happened because he reached down to touch that shrapnel. Again, a very important warning that these missile parts that are falling on the ground are hot, are sharp, and potentially even explosive. So you should never touch them. We saw in the Old City, for example, that a group of young boys were gathering around to see the shrapnel. Police came and moved them right away because it's quite dangerous. In addition to that 42-year-old man, a 50-year-old man, there were sirens, as you mentioned, in the center throughout the day as well. And in Kiryat Gat, one of the things that we're also seeing happen is that when these sirens go off, people panic. A 50-year-old man got off of a bus and was hit by a car. He's in serious condition. He was running to get to a shelter, and that car was running to get to a shelter as well. So, there's a lot of speculation about why now we're seeing these rockets fall in Jerusalem. Keep in mind that in Jerusalem, we also have the U.S. Embassy located here. We've had several impacts near that embassy in the last couple of days, including Shabbat, and again, the Knesset and other strategic sites.
Maayan, thank you for that update. We'll be back to you soon.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, the Israeli Air Force hit over 200 targets in western and central Iran in the past day. According to the IDF, the targets included command centers that were manned by Iranian soldiers, air defense systems, plus weapon storage and production sites. The focus of the strikes were command centers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Basij paramilitary force. The IDF says it's expanding strikes across western and central Iran to systematically damage the regime's control and command capabilities. Footage released by the IDF shows UAV launch squads and missile teams fleeing struck sites with an Israeli aircraft tracking and eliminating the operatives in real time. The military says these operations are designed to reduce missile and drone fire towards Israel, and they continue nonstop to destroy the regime's ballistic missile and UAV infrastructure. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump said Sunday that he has demanded that about 7 countries send warships to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. Though his appeals have brought no commitments as oil prices soar during the Iran war. However, Israel has been working with the United States to secure the waterway where about 1/5 of the world's traded oil normally flows. The president did not name the countries that depend heavily on Middle Eastern oil and are being asked to join a coalition to police the strait. Next, the Israel Defense Forces say the troops have moved deeper into southern Lebanon as part of an expanded buffer zone against Hezbollah. The IDF says the 91st Galilee Division launched a raid in the eastern sector of southern Lebanon, where troops encountered and killed several Hezbollah operatives. The military says the operation is aimed at expanding at what it calls a forward defense area, including the destruction of terror infrastructure and the elimination of armed cells operating near the border. Before ground forces advanced, the IDF said it carried out heavy airstrikes and artillery fire to move threats in the area. And with us now is a very special guest, Noel Haddad. Her family left Lebanon because of Hezbollah, and she still has family in Lebanon today, very close to where the fighting between Hezbollah and the IDF is taking place. Noel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Noel, can you tell me about your family and what led them to leave Lebanon?
Well, in the early 70s, during the Lebanese Civil War, my grandmother, a mother of 14 children, so that's a huge family, of course, 5 of them, inclusive of my father, left because things were getting very intense with the Iranian-backed Hezbollah, the complexities that were there, and people were looking to leave in the masses. There was a lot of immigration that happened in that period. So that's actually why I ended up being born here in the States, because if that wouldn't have happened, I could have been born in Lebanon very easily. Yeah.
And how is your family now? What are they hearing on the ground?
Well, I have family as close as about 10 minutes away from the bombings and also up to a few hours away. They are in different locations. It is unfortunately a way of life for them. It's a reality for them. This is all that they've known is war. Hezbollah has really taken over what was a Christian nation and changed lives for everyone for many decades. And so they're living in, I would say, one of the most intense. They're saying this is the most intense out of all the years that they have been living this way. They're saying this is different. Very scary times.
Noel, so you are a Christian yourself. What is it like, and your family as well, what is life like right now for civilians, Christian civilians living in areas where Hezbollah has strong influence?
They are very afraid. There is a lot of fear of where Hezbollah will place themselves. There's a lot of news stories. It's very important that we are aware of the truth from lived experiences and not propaganda, because Hezbollah is going into Christian neighborhoods as well. And they are taking up refuge in places that Christians do live in, making it very dangerous and impossible to live without fear as a Christian.
And what do you think that many people in the West misunderstand about Hezbollah and its role inside of Lebanon?
I live in Los Angeles, which is the largest Persian community in the world outside of Iran. And all of my friends here, all we talk about as Lebanese, as Armenians, as Persian, all we talk about is how hard it is to live in a nation where Western Christians and Western people don't understand necessarily the actual kind of disrespectful views that they have towards our lived experiences, that these regimes are dangerous. These regimes take away human dignities, human rights, and yet you have people in the West that are rallying for these ideas and for these people to have power and to rise up with them. And it's so hard to live in a world where they're choosing ignorance.
And Noelle, I want to ask this last question. Israel formally considers Lebanon an enemy state. What is your hope for the future between the countries of Israel and Lebanon?
I know that my family wants Lebanon to be free. They want them to be free of this regime. I know same for my Persian friends. They want their families to be free from this regime. So my hope is that we can safely, because there is collateral damage, there are innocent lives lost. Unfortunately, that is war. And it's not fair to the innocent people. But we do want freedom. We do want peace with Israel. My family loves Israel. We don't hate Israel. We love our Jewish brothers and sisters as well, and we just want to have peace and human dignity to live.
Noelle, thank you for sharing and speaking up, using your voice, and we pray for your family's safety. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Now, Israeli officials have told Reuters that Jerusalem and Beirut are expected to hold talks in the coming days aimed at securing a durable ceasefire and the disarmament of Hezbollah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's confidant Ron Dermer would lead the talks for Israel with the participation of U.S. and French mediators. Beirut is forming a delegation, but no date has been set. However, on Sunday, Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar denied such talks will happen. He also blamed the Lebanese government for not doing enough. Now, Israel is changing the way missile warnings are issued as the war with Iran enters its third week. The IDF's Homefront Command says the country will be divided into 21 separate alert zones, replacing the previous system of just 4 regions. Officials say the change is designed to improve accuracy and reduce false alerts by sending warnings only to areas actually at risk from incoming missiles or interceptor debris. The upgraded system uses operational data and new technology to better predict potential impact zones. Civil defense guidelines for the public remain the same. Residents are still urged to enter a protected space when sirens sound and stay there until all clear is given. And with us now to discuss today's headlines is Aral Tobalam, the Director of Research at the Forum for Foreign Relations, and Dr. Ele Karman, a Senior Researcher at the International Institute for Counterterrorism, ICT, Reichman University. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Very much.
Mr. Tobalam, we're now on day 17 of this war. From a strategic perspective, how do you assess where this war stands right now?
Thank you, India. As always, it's a pleasure to be on the show. For me, I really don't think that there's any way this regime can recover. It's trying, and it's certainly unleashed a propaganda narrative online that is currying quite a lot of favor among Islamists, at least here in the UK. But it's not really got any grip on reality anymore. The regime has suffered serious damage to all of its strategic military outposts. The IRGC and the Basij have effectively staged a coup of the political leadership in Iran. Of course, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is dead. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei, has been named as his successor, but we are not even sure if Mojtaba is alive. There are many reports that he is either comatose or dead, possibly with missing limbs. And so the regime right now is and has been in complete freefall. And I think that, quite frankly, from June 2025, it was bound to happen. Now, one of the reasons why this war was started on the 28th of February was because the regime had shown quite clear intent to continue in its funding and networking of terror proxies across the world, as well as a rapid rebuilding of its nuclear ambitions. Now, this regime has, as I've said, been a thorn in the side of the world order for quite a long time now, just about 47 years. I think it's all time that we saw something new coming for Iran.
And shifting to Lebanon, Dr. Karman, we're hearing mixed signals about possible talks between Israel and Lebanon over a ceasefire and Hezbollah's disarmament. How realistic is that scenario right now?
First of all, I think that we missed a bit the war against Hezbollah in the 2024 year, when we didn't occupy completely the territory of southern Lebanon until the Litani River, and we didn't destroy practically part of the long-range arsenal of Hezbollah's missiles. Now, we saw that the missile Hezbollah is active, is practically, this was the role of Hezbollah in the Iranian regime strategy, to attack Israel immediately when Iran was challenged. It didn't happen immediately, it happened only after Ayatollah Khamenei was killed. But still we see that Hezbollah is ready to take the risk, not only for the organization, but also for all the Lebanese people and the state. Unfortunately, the Lebanese army was not able to disarm Hezbollah as it was concluded or accorded in 2024. And therefore, we have to fight again, practically from, not from the beginning, because it's a much weaker organization, but still we see that they are resilient and they are kicking back. What is new is indeed the proposal of the president of Lebanon, General Aoun, that Lebanon entered directly talks with Israel about an agreement, ceasefire, and perhaps an agreement how to challenge the Hezbollah. Not alone, because again, the Lebanese government is not able to do it. But we have at least 2 or 3 partners. First of all, the United States, but also France. France is considered to be one of the patrons of the Lebanese historically. But the plan that was presented by France is not giving the real, I would say, solution how to disarm Hezbollah. And the talks are only beginning on the diplomatic level. It's very important, first of all, for the fact that the Lebanon is hinting even that it is ready to enter in a peace agreement with Israel, perhaps even to reach, to join the Abraham Accords. But this is very early in order to evaluate how things will evaluate. Much of it is also dependent on how the war in Iran will finish or will continue, how resilient the government in Tehran will be in the next weeks. And also how the regional war, because now we have a regional war, will influence the other actors, the Gulf countries, Turkey, Egypt, and this is a very complex situation. As I said, the only positive thing for the moment is the President's own proposal and the decision by the Israeli government, in spite of some voices that we hear from the government, the decision to name ex-minister Dremer to lead the negotiations is a good one, and he is very close to the American administration, and we'll see how also France can help in achieving such kind of a positive solution.
And we'll get back to that. For now, Mr. Tabalan, the IDF says it has struck more than 200 targets inside Iran in just the past day. Over the course of this whole operation, it's been thousands of targets struck, according to CENTCOM. Do we know how much longer the IRGC can withhold these U.S.-Israel strikes?
I think that we must understand the characteristic of this regime. For the regime, the main issue is survival. Survival at any cost, including the cost to the country, to the infrastructure, and clearly to its own people. We saw how they killed tens of thousands of their own citizens in order to survive. And they are threatening that if there will be now new manifestations or new attempts to throw out the regime, they will respond even in a fiercer way. So they also prepare themselves. We see that there was a kind of preparation based on their experience, how we destroyed the Hezbollah leadership in 23-24, and how we destroyed the 12 days war, the leadership, the military leadership, and the nuclear leadership. They prepared a kind of hierarchical change. I mean, those which were killed were immediately replaced by people more or less of the same level, which have experience, and for the moment they resist and even are challenging the United States by attacking the Gulf countries, which, strangely enough, in my opinion, they are not reacting. They are afraid of Iran even these moments. But now we see that President Trump has decided to continue the fight because he has no many choices. To leave the Iranians want the war is not an alternative. There's even possibility that the new Marines unit sent to the Middle East will occupy the Karg island, which is now practically the life, I would say, the life channel for the economy of Iran. Perhaps this will influence the Iranian regime, but again, I'm afraid that this regime, like Hamas, after the war in Gaza began in October 2023, is ready to sacrifice a lot, infrastructure and also its own people. The problem is, I think, from our Israeli point of view, is the 450 kilo of enriched uranium, which are not yet monitored, or we don't know where they are hidden, and this will be the main challenge. If we want to finish the war in a positive way, at least we have to destroy and to find and to perhaps to export those kilos of enriched uranium, and not permit in the future Iran to begin to return to enrichment of uranium.
And Ara, would you like to hop in there also and address how much longer do you think the IRGC can withhold these U.S.-Israeli strikes?
Sorry?
Yes, of course. Thank you. And I thank Dr. Carmon for setting out quite a few points that actually are very pertinent here. So one of the points that was brought up is Kharg Island. Now, Kharg Island, for those who don't know, is a 5-mile strip of coral in the northern Persian Gulf. And yet it's responsible for 90% of Iranian oil exports and I believe $78 billion a year worth of oil exports. It has been referred by multiple sources, including President Trump himself, as Iran's crown jewel. And targets, military targets on that island have been quite significantly bombed by U.S. forces, largely because the Strait of Hormuz remains closed for business, at least to non-Iranian ships. I think it's just today that the first non-Iranian oil tanker was able to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. At least 16 oil tankers have been and other vessels have been attacked by Iranian forces in the past 2 weeks. And what we're seeing is actually a willingness from the part of Trump, who acknowledged the value of Kharg Island all the way back in 1988, to stage what I believe might be a military occupation of the island. If Iran loses control of Kharg Island, it will never be able to continue in this war. The IRGC depends on it. Now, the strategic weapon and response that Iran has chosen is actually not missiles, and I don't think missiles are the most dangerous weapon that Iran can have in this war, nor do I think it's the stockpiles of enriched uranium, however dangerous that may be. I think it's actually the yuan. Now, a senior Iranian official about 2 days ago told CNN that the Strait of Hormuz would be open, but only if the states that use it would be able to denominate oil sales in the Chinese yuan and not in the dollar. Now, this is an attempt by Iran and by its partner, China, to fundamentally disrupt the petrodollar supremacy system that has been in place since at least the Nixon administration, which mandates that Gulf Arab states and other oil traders will always denominate sales of oil in US dollars. And that's precisely why the central banks of most, if not all countries, always have dollar reserves. Now, the problem with this particular approach is that Trump has actually given China a dilemma. which is he's invited China to be part of the coalition to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by sending warships and so on. Now, China is at a crossroads here. If they do send warships to the Strait of Hormuz in order to make sure that it stays open alongside other allies of the USA, such as Japan and France, then, well, how does that play out in Iran? How does that play out with the IRGC leadership, who have been selling oil to China at a heavily discounted price? But if they don't concede to those demands, how does that play out in the wider world? How does it play out with China buying oil at $70 per barrel when the rest is buying at somewhere around 96 or maybe even as high as 110? And so China's in a bit of a pickle here, and the regime will ultimately depend on Kharg Island and its sustainability. If it loses Kharg Island, it loses the war.
Absolutely. And in turning back to Lebanon, Dr. Karman, really, according to the last ceasefire agreement Israel made with Lebanon was supposed to, and the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army were supposed to deal with Hezbollah, and that really hasn't happened. Why hasn't Lebanon dealt with Hezbollah?
First of all, the Lebanese army is a weak army. Many of its soldiers, not officers, are of Shia origin. And historically, we know that there were a relationship between the heads of the army and the Hezbollah. For instance, during the war in Syria in 2013-14, the Lebanese army passed to Hezbollah in Syria tanks and APCs that it received from the United States and France. And even we heard lately that the new head of the army, which replaced General Aoun, has said that he cannot or does not want to fight Hezbollah. And therefore, we have a problem with these military institutions, which was supported by the United States and France for many years. The second is that the government of the president and the government and even the parliament are afraid of a civil war. In this framework, it's very important the position of the head of the parliament, Nabi Berri, which is a very old politician, head of the Amal party, which is also a Shia party. And at the beginning of the war, he was very critical of Hezbollah and tried to convince them not to enter the fray. But now it seems that again he is in some way cooperating or does not attack Hezbollah and does not support the government's steps in order to disarm Hezbollah. It's a very complicated issue, as always. As I said, in my opinion, Israel should have occupied in 2024 all the southern Lebanon until the Litani, and should have destroyed the arsenal that was in the Bekaa Valley through a very important commando operation, but this was not done. And we continue to attack some cells of Hezbollah in the south, even sometimes in the Bekaa Valley, but not really the heart of the arsenal, which is underground in northern Lebanon.
And Mr. Tobalam, we've heard mixed estimates about when the war could end, but where does that estimate stand now? Do we know? And what would influence that estimate?
The Gulf countries, first of all, which are now attacked quite seriously by Iran, especially not only the military bases, American military bases on their territory, but also their gas and oil facilities, and even the airports. Countries which, like the Emirates and Qatar, are its economy based on terrorism, economic diversification, and tourism is very hit by Iran itself. And this was on purpose in order to press the Americans, not only the Gulf countries. So it depends a lot on the economic effects. If indeed the price of the oil will continue to go up, there is no possibility to stop this kind of price of oil, and the international pressure, not only by the Gulf states but also by other countries, including inside the United States, business and economic institution will press president, and for the moment it's very difficult to know. I think at least 2-3 weeks more, but it could lead to some kind of agreement. But at the same time, from the point of view of Israel, it could lead also to a war of attrition, a longer war of attrition, and we don't know, at least at the moment, as long as we don't find the enriched uranium, how it will end.
And I'm sorry, this is all the time we have for this panel. I thank you both for joining us, and we hope to see you back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, India.
All the best.
That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media on all our platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm India Naftali. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.
You can only control you and your side of what's happening. And if you want something more from the relationship, don't come to somebody going, please, I need. Just provide what you want. I'm going to give you a personal example. One time I was with my husband at home and we're talking and I was like, the mood was so heavy. And I was like, we just need to lighten the mood. Like lighten the mood.
Do
here.
something.
Do something, right? I'm telling him, do something. And he's like, well, if you want to laugh, so laugh, tell a joke. You do something, like whatever you need to satisfy you. Like, same thing, like, I'll come along, I'll do. And so I was like, but nothing's funny. I was like, fine, I'm just going to laugh. And I just started laughing. And that was it. And I felt better. And that's what
hilarious.
I needed. There was nothing that was funny. There was no reason that you should actually be laughing, but the mood didn't feel right. And I wanted the mood changed. I didn't necessarily want to change the mood, right? But I have a right to put that on. If you do that for me. I'm Aliza Ben Shalom on the Jewish Matchmaker podcast on ILTV, and we are taking your questions today. So if you want to submit a question, you can send it to me at Aliza Ben Shalom on Instagram or marriagemindedmentor.com/podcasts. For now, we have a few questions, and I'm here with Sarah.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you. I have no idea what's about to hit us. Take it easy on me. I know, I'm just kidding. Okay.
All right. First question comes in from Candace. How can you tell when a man's interest is rooted in real curiosity about partnership versus sexual chemistry alone, especially when the connection starts long distance?
Long distance? So, okay. So I'm just thinking now of all of these stories that have happened over the years. One in particular was where he just kept leaning into asking more sexual questions or asking about experience or leaning into where we're going to meet or maybe we'll get a hotel. Like it just the type of conversation.
I feel like you can tell.
Yeah, you could tell. And I was like, ooh. I thought you were going to ask about in person, like how do I know the difference, right?
Well, let's answer
that also, because that was making me think that you, again, when this happened recently, he said, hey, come back to my place, we'll cook dinner, we'll hang out, we'll have some wine. Done. Like we knew the direction that this was going, and it's very hard because then you end up physically engaged sooner than you may have wanted to because of circumstances.
Right.
In Judaism, there is this concept of yichud, of not being in this private moment with somebody so that you don't have to advance things sooner than you actually want or need to. Go out to a restaurant. Like, it's nice that you want to cook. Like, that's not for now. Or if you're going to do something, figure out how to do it in a communal space because that's going to be something that's going to actually make a connection, but also if they excessively compliment your looks or they're like, wow, I'm just so taken by you. Like, at first you're like, oh, that's so
a
nice.
compliment or two is okay.
Yeah,
but when it
when it's excessive, or listen, not everybody has this, but if you quiet yourselves down and you just take a moment and you're like, how do I feel about this? If the answer is like, ick, like I want to like that. It's nice. Thanks for the compliment, but that was weird.
Yeah.
Okay. If that's your reaction, that is a sign that something is probably a little bit off and or making you uncomfortable and probably leaning in the direction that you don't want to go.
Right.
That's the main piece of it. And I think that we have to tune into that. And also you have to ask yourself, what is my boundary? Where am I comfortable at physically with this person?
Right.
And where am I not comfortable? And you set the boundary. And if it's long distance and they're having a phone conversation and they're getting a little bit too personal, risque, personal, whatever you want to call it, yeah, you just have to say to them, oh, yeah, not looking forward to going there, right? If they don't stop and you're like, you can either say, look, gotta go now. Oh, gotta call on the other line. Gotta run. Get off the phone.
Right.
Just get off the phone and don't continue. If you're, she's asking the question, which makes me think there's something wrong.
Yeah, no,
because,
100%.
Because why are you going to ask this question if you wouldn't feel uncomfortable and even have a question to ask unless there was something that's actually wrong? So I think something's wrong.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to tell. Guys are not secretive about it, except where they think that you don't want something physical, but they do, and so they try to say the things that they think you want them to say, blah, 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 which, by the way, I feel like the 5-date challenge comes up in every single episode.
By the way, the 5-date challenge is no touching for 5 dates.
Right.
After that, Eliza looks away. But no touching for 5 dates for the purpose of knowing, do you like me? Do I like you? And is there something here that's not physical that is good and therefore worth pursuing?
And I feel like the virtual version of that is like no sexting, no, doing a video.
Nothing inappropriate, people.
I wasn't going to get graphic. But I think the point is when you put the 5-date challenge into place, you will see very quickly who is there just for the physical.
That's also true. And people fight me on this. This is like, if I could get one message across to you, this will solve all of your questions. If you want to know, do I like you and do you like me, and you want clarity on both ends, go out 5 times without touching. Nothing. No pat on the back. I'm gonna be really clear. No shake of the hand. No hello. Nothing. Hi, how are you? Sometimes I'll even wave with my left hand so it doesn't look like I'm looking like I'm waving or I'm shaking. Like there shouldn't even be anything. I'll I'll be awkward about it. I'll be like, hi, how are you? Like my hand's like way behind my head, which is a ridiculous place for it to be. If you ever see me doing that because there's a guy standing there, I'm like, hey, how are you? Or like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you. I'll have really awkward poses that show my body language is closed. And if I have to, I'll just say like, oh, I'm Shomrani. Yeah, I guard my touch. I don't touch other men besides my husband and children and parents.
I just realized that not everyone's watching this. Eliza's hand when she's waving it is like literally way behind her head, or she like clasped her hands in front of her, just basically making them very unavailable for any form of touch.
Yeah, I gave like a very physical clue that this is not where I'm at.
Yeah.
But when you do this, I know whether I like the human that's there.
Right.
You don't need a dating coach. You don't need a matchmaker. You don't need a therapist. You don't need a friend. You don't need a parent. You need nobody to talk to. You literally need 5 dates to see. There just needs to be a whole show about this.
Yeah.
That's it. In 5 dates, it's like yes or no. It's not yes or no in 30 seconds.
Right.
5 dates, no touching. By the end of this, do I like you? That's it.
They're going to need a chaperone to make sure there's no
there's gonna be cameras. We're going to put cameras on them. Call me if you want to discuss.
This sounds like I would watch this.
Right?
Could you imagine how many times someone's going to lean over to just tap their arm or their leg.
They have to wear something that has like a buzzer on it, and the producers would be like,
like a shock collar?
No shocks though, but it just jiggles them. And you go, oh, whoa, okay, yeah, we need.
I would watch that.
Okay.
Okay.
So
This is how ideas are born.
By the way, yeah, I love all the brainstorming. But it's so true. You literally don't need anything else. I will have double confirmation. There's no questions. There's no maybes. There's no what's their intention.
Right.
Nobody, male or female, they're not sticking around to decide whether after 5 dates, I know I like you.
Yeah.
After 5 dates, you know you like me. It's not maybe. If we make it to date 5, there's something here worth looking into further to continue the relationship. And it's not because we got physical.
Right.
And plenty, like handfuls of men have said, 5 dates, I'd even date her 10 dates. And one guy told me, I'd even go 20. And I was like, wow. He goes, look, if I like her, I like her.
Right.
I was like, yeah, but, other women, you're just going to, like, get really intimate on the first couple days. He's like, yeah, but I'm not going to stick with her. And I'm like, But he was honest about it. He wasn't being anything but true. Like, if I really like somebody, the physical can wait. I don't really care. I like the human, and I have clarity. And when I've told men this, they're like, I like this. This is, like, very easy. Like, it's systematic.
Yeah.
And, like, if you're telling me I'm going to have clarity and I'll know and I don't have to call you to figure it out, this is great.
And it doesn't mean that, like, after 5 dates, you know if you want to marry this person. But it does mean I like you enough to know that there's potential here and I want to date, or there's nothing to talk about. I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. And you can get to there's nothing to talk about before the 5 dates. You can have clarity at date 1, 2, 3. But by date 5, if you still want to go on a date 6.
You kind of like her.
And he kind of likes you.
Amazing. I'm going to jump into the next question. That came from Jean. Would you ever recommend dating someone who's either not religious or not as religious as you? My daughter in her early 20s is single. My good friend's son, who's a year older, they're both finishing college and will have great careers. They have a ton in common and both have been raised in loving, close families. On paper, it's a dream match. There's a but.
But I'm like, wait, which side? One side's religious and one side's not so
my
religious.
daughter is more religious, however. She goes to church every week and faith is important to her. This boy was raised in a religious family but only attends with his family when he's home from college. What do you think? Now, before you answer, we also got a question from Alana that said, should Jews have different levels of observance date? I keep Shabbat and kosher. Is it possible to date men who are less or more observant if I'm happy in my path as it is right now?
Okay. First of all, I love this question.
I know.
It
Me
also
too.
means that we have all kinds of listeners that are here with us that are trusting us to guide them on the journey towards marriage and family. So thank you. So let's start with the family talking about church. What you brought up that he... Tell me about him.
So he was raised in a religious family but only attends church with his family when he's home from college.
Okay. So great. He does attend church when he's home with his family. College is temporary. He's not going to be in college for the rest of his life.
True.
So, like, if we look at the situation, if he would come home or if he would, wherever he's going to live, be with his family, there would probably be this expectation that he's going to go to church because that's just what he does. That's just the norm. So even though he's not where you're at, the likelihood of him matching where you're at or being comfortable with doing whatever's the norm for you guys, it's just normal to him. So it might not be his what he leans into when he's away from his family and away from his community and away from the regular pace of life that he's used to. But when he's home, that's what he does. So the fact that all the other values are in alignment, the families are connected, all these things make me happy. So I give you 2 thumbs up and I would say lean into this.
Okay.
And I wouldn't make even a big deal about it. It's almost... in business, they say assume the sale. It's almost assumed that, of course, when he's home, he would go to church and he would be a part of a community. Like, why is that in question?
Right.
It's only in question because in a temporary situation outside of this, in university, he's not like that.
Right.
But the norm is that he is. And so I would lean into that. She and he could always have a conversation about it.
It's so funny
but I
because,
wouldn't make it heavy.
Right. There's a part of me that